We're still running, aren't we? Yeah. Okay. We'll make a start there. So welcome to everyone who's joined us. We've got quite a few members of public with us today. So for a bit of housekeeping, toilets are to the rear. We'll take a break in between items shortly for people to be able to leave in between different planning items. If there's any fire alarms that go off, please just make your way to the exits and follow ourselves to those. And can I remind people to turn their phones on silent for the course of the meeting. Just to run you through how it'll work when we get to each item, we'll be initially discussing and voting on the officer recommendation as laid out in the report so that you can understand that. And there will also be a section on public participation, which a number of you will be here for. When you come up to speak, just take a seat and start speaking when you're ready, and you'll have 3 minutes from when you start speaking at that time. When you finish speaking, if you can just stay seated, because members of the committee will have a chance to ask you questions at that time. So I'll just let you know when you can return to your seat after that. Otherwise, I think that covers everything. The first item we have is just declarations of interest. We don't have any substitutes today, so we'll move to that. Does anyone have any interest they want to declare for the meeting? Yeah, Councillor Melly, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am predetermined on item 4C in that I have, with my ward colleagues, submitted an objection urging refusal, so I won't take part in that agenda item. Yeah,
thank you. And Councillor Clark.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, similarly to Councillor Melly, predetermined on 4C due to our objection that we submitted for the application.
Of course, thank you.
It's sitting out for that one.
Yeah, thank you. In that case, I don't see any other declarations. So we'll move on to the first item, which is the minutes. We have minutes from the last two committees. We'll just take them both together. Does anyone have any comments on those minutes that were circulated? No, in that case, we'll take that as a sign that those are approved, and we'll move forward. We'll move on to the first, I believe the first agenda item, which is item 4A, 100 Main Street in Fulford, joined by Gareth Arnold, the Development Manager, and Natalie Ramadan as the Development Management Officer. So can you take us through the presentation, please?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Item 4A relates to a site at 102 Main Street, Fulford. This is two residential houses to the front and a commercial building to the rear. Just on the Google image, so the site is roughly outlined as shown on the image behind. Just another view from the south. Extent of the property with its access to the south side of the site. The site's in the conservation area. The conservation area appraisal lists that 100 is a site of positive value in the conservation area, 102 neutral, and the buildings to the rear, the former commercial buildings, and the additions to the rear of those residential properties are considered to be detractors in the conservation area. Some more photographs. So from Main Street, a close up of 100, then 102. Buildings to the rear. And then the rear of 100 and 102. And that's the access into properties to the rear of the site, which will utilise the same access as this scheme to Main Street. So the existing site plan. And the existing ground floor plan, first floor plan, and then the existing elevations, and then the elevations of the outbuilding. It's a demolition plan. It's a general site demolition. Ground floor demolitions. First floor demolitions. And here's the proposed site plan. So 100 and 102 will be converted into 4 houses. There's also alterations to the roof, including a hip to gable and rear dormers, and a rear extension with a roof terrace above that for each of those 4 properties. And the commercial building, following its demolition, replaced with a dwelling, which provides some car parking for the wider site underneath part of it. So the ground floor, you see that conversion into 4 separate dwellings there. The parking area and the ground floor of the new building. First floor with the external terrace above that extended ground floor rear area. Each of them has a small courtyard. Elevations. So this is the elevation of the new building to the rear, the new dwelling to the rear. It's rear or western elevation. And the north elevation. Proposed elevations of 100 and 102 as converted, and then at the rear, see the ground floor extension, first floor terrace, and then the proposed dormers, and you'll recall from the existing elevation. So this is now altered to a hip to gable design on 102. Yeah, that's it. Again, for members' information, you recall that the application was deferred from the agenda on the 10th of October because of issues with the BAT survey that had been submitted, and is now represented back to you for determination. Thank you. Oh, we do have an update. Natalie can run through very briefly.
Thank you. So in terms of updates on this one, at paragraph 1.7 in the public report, this needs to be updated as the decision for the previous application on this site has now been quashed by decision of the court and is now back with the local planning authority for redetermination. We received an additional representation on the 8th of January on ecological grounds, and the details of those are set out within your update sheets. And so it's on ecological grounds, and also at the end of the representation, the objector also notes that other features of the scheme, as highlighted by the parish council, would also justify refusal. We've assessed the additional information, and we still recommend approval subject to the conditions as set out within the report. Thank you.
Thank you. For all of it, or the second part just then, so nearly all of it. Okay. No, we'll speak up for the remainder of the meeting. Sorry. Okay. The second update part. Yes. Yeah. Can you just repeat that?
Yeah, so in terms of an update on 100 Main Street application, paragraph 1.7 in the public report, so this needs to be updated as the decision on the previous application on this site has been quashed by a decision of the court and is now back with the local planning authority for redetermination. We have received an additional representation for this application on the 8th of January, which objected to the application on ecological grounds and also highlighted that other features of the scheme, as highlighted by the parish council, would also justify refusal. We've assessed the additional information, and the officer's recommendation still remains for approval, subject to conditions set out within the report.
Thank you. I'll just ask at this time, does anyone have any questions, clarifications on the plans themselves? Councillor Waters, please.
probably jumped in too quick, not actually on the plans themselves, more on this update.
Okay, yeah,
As the previous decision was challenged with judicial review and was quashed, it does concern me to read through that additional representation, which seems to be threatening similar action and saying that the approach taken as regards these back surveys and conditions is unlawful. Can we have some legal advice before we go any further with this?
thanks. We're just being joined by Eleanor Sawfleet, who is the senior ecologist for the council.
Hi everyone. Can everyone hear me at the back?
Yeah, okay.
Can you hear me okay? Good. Good. So in 2022, a single bat was identified within the outbuilding, coming out of the east elevation. And so obviously that will require a Natural England European Protected Species licence before any additional work can go forward. The licence effectively, if granted by Natural England, allows you to work outside the law. So that's the Wildlife and Countryside Act. So obviously we'd write that into the planning condition. We'd have a planning condition saying that a licence is required before any demolition works are undertaken. And within that licence application, it's a package of information that the ecologist provides and sets out a system of mitigation. So that would have been conditioned based on that 2022 information. When the application was resubmitted 2023, we just asked for an update on the status of the site to make sure that that kind of baseline data was still applicable. But effectively, we'd still have the same condition for the European Protected Species Licence, because as soon as you identify a roost, it's legally protected under the Wildlife and Countryside Act, and it's Natural England's decision to decide whether to grant that licence. So that's where we are at the moment. We're going to have a condition for the provision of the European Protected Species Licence, and that will stipulate that no demolition work can take place in any part of the site until the licence has been approved by and granted by Natural England and shown to us, and we've seen that licence has been issued.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Councillor Ward, we have to look at each application individually. So even though a decision's been made on the other one, we have to do the same. That was the advice that's been given. It's the same process essentially for each one. So it's
Just
Yeah, thank you,
so
Chair.
that first the first application, there were 3 grounds on which it was quashed, and the authority agreed with those 3 grounds, but not the other grounds that were put forward by the claimant. In terms of the ecology issues, the issue there was we hadn't imposed the condition, whereas through the package of in the agenda, you'll see the conditions are imposed. You'll see the advice of senior ecologist, and you've received the advice verbally just then. So we're confident that the issues are covered this time around.
Councillor Millie.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering if we could please look more closely at the parking arrangements. It's just difficult to see it on this plan. Would you mind zooming in a bit? I think there's 5 car parking spaces provided. There's 4 together at the top of the plan, and then is there one separately in front of the 5th dwelling? I think on the site visits, there were some concerns about how close that was to the access to that
Yes,
dwelling,
so
and if that allowed, an accessible
1, 2,
access standing.
3, 4, 5. Yeah.
So does that leave enough space to be able to get in and out of car doors and in and out of the front door of that dwelling and that sort of thing? There was a question about it raised at the site visits, I think.
Yeah, the car parking spaces are 5 by 2.7, which is a standard car parking space. In terms of the one below 102C, which is a separate dwelling, there is 300 mil either side, which we consider sufficient.
Thanks. Can't see any other questions at this time, so I'll move into public participation. The first speaker is Mary Urmston, please, from the Parish Council speaking objection. If you can join us.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm speaking on behalf of the Parish Council, and we would like to see this site redeveloped, but there are many reasons why we believe this scheme should be refused. Our most recent objections are well set out at 3.14 of your report, but most have not been addressed. The two semi-detached dwellings at the front will be largely demolished, including much of the exterior building fabric and everything inside. This is regrettable because one of these buildings is a non-designated heritage asset. In addition, the subdivision of the two buildings into 4 separate units will cause irreversible harm to their character, especially at the rear, where 4 huge dormers will dominate the roofscape. Even though the rear of the site isn't all visible from Main Street, I do recall Gareth's advice at a previous meeting where he emphasised that it's the impact on the conservation area as a whole that needs to be considered, not only whether development is visible in public view. Most of this heritage harm could be avoided by retaining the 2 semi-detached buildings with a reduction in the scale of the rear extension. Regarding accessibility, Local Plan Policy T1 states that all development should be fully accessible to all groups within the community. We've set out many reasons why the access is unsuitable, and we've pointed out that the only access to 3 of the properties is from the rear courtyard, so these occupants have no other option than to use the drive at all times. The fact that larger vehicles can't access the courtyard at all means that even removal vans would need to find a space to park along Main Street and then somehow carry fridges, freezers and furniture up the access drive and through the courtyard. This would be unworkable in practice. We asked for an equality impact assessment to be carried out, but this seems to have been ignored. Even though the driveway isn't adopted, Policy T1 requires development to demonstrate safe and appropriate access to the adjacent adopted highway. And the conflict with this policy is another reason that would justify a refusal. Regarding the drainage, we're very concerned that the flood risk officer hasn't commented, and we question whether the suitability of the strategy has been properly evaluated and whether the calculations and other details are even correct. Furthermore, the strategy is entirely based on a much earlier layout plan, which has since been revised several times. We therefore question whether condition 19 would be effective or enforceable when the drainage is clearly based on an out-of-date plan. Finally, we don't believe that the BAT surveys have been properly updated to satisfy Natural England requirements, that survey information should be of sufficient quality for you to be confident that a licence will be granted.
That's 3 minutes, thank you.
Okay, so I could go into the BATs a bit more, but we hope you will refuse it.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions? Sorry, Councillor Melly.
Thank you, Chair. Could you please tell us more about the bats?
Well, I'm not an ecologist. I'm not as qualified as Eleanor, for instance, but I do think that your statutory duty is to consider the derogation tests in order to grant planning permission, because Natural England need to issue a licence to destroy the bat roost, and I think it's all set out in the update. My comments to, so they say that their standing advice says that adequate survey information is required before the application can be determined, so that you can assess whether Natural England will actually issue a licence. And Natural England, their advice is that they require full survey advice before they will consider a licence. and the advice hadn't been updated. They did an evening survey where they discovered this bat exiting the building, but they've never been back to do, and that's out of date now. They should have updated that. What the ecologist did was he came back and he did well, there's no evidence to show that he actually went in the buildings. There's one photo of one of the roof spaces. So, and he only looked at the buildings. He didn't do any actual surveys. So in that respect, we don't believe that the information has been adequately updated. I'm sorry, I haven't explained that very well.
No, thank you. I can't see any other questions at this time, so if you want to take a seat again.
Thank you very much.
For your time. The next speaker is Councillor Kate Revilius, who's the ward councillor for Fulford. She can't be here today, so she's provided a statement which I will read out on her behalf on the item. I won't time myself, I'll just go in. People are living longer lives and the proportion of older people in the population is increasing. Ensuring that our housing stock is appropriate for people with disabilities is a crucial part of planning for this demographic change and ensuring that people can live safe and independent lives. The last census found that nearly 1/4 of Fulford's population is over the age of 65, and the ward profile states that just over 17% of residents have some limitation in their day-to-day activities. Paragraph 96 of the NPPF says that planning decisions should aim to achieve healthy, inclusive and safe spaces and beautiful buildings which A, promote social interaction, B, are safe and accessible, and C, enable and support healthy lifestyles. NPPF 112 says that applications for development should A, give priority first to pedestrian and cycle movements, B, address the needs of people with disabilities, C, create places that are safe, secure and attractive, which minimise scope for conflict between pedestrians, cyclists and vehicles, and D, allow for the efficient delivery of goods and access by service and emergency vehicles. The access and parking arrangements for the proposed development failed both of these NPPF tests and completely failed to meet even the most basic level of the nationally described space standard for visitable dwellings. The sketch illustrating the parking dimensions shows that the entrance to each terrace areas are between 902 millimetres and 910 millimetres wide, whereas section 1A, paragraph 1.6D of the building regulations for the access to and use of buildings, so that where a driveway forms all or part of the approach route must be at least 1800 millimetres wide, so that a wheelchair user can pass a parked car. The tracking diagrams for the proposed development demonstrate how hostile this environment will be to pedestrians and wheelchair users, with the entire courtyard area required for vehicles to turn around and no safe route for residents or visitors to walk or wheel and reach the front doors of the dwellings. This does not promote social interaction, it is not safe and accessible, and it doesn't enable and support healthy lifestyles. It also fails to apply the council's transport hierarchy, where pedestrians are given priority over other modes of transport, something that has been a part of York's local transport plan for decades. Meanwhile, the tracking diagrams also show that delivery vehicles will be unable to turn on site, and instead the expectation is that delivery vehicles will park on Main Street, adding to the already significant parking pressure, and traipse deliveries around to the courtyard. I am very keen to see these buildings developed. They've sat empty for far too long and could provide much needed homes. But I cannot support the proposed access arrangements associated with these plans. There are other transport solutions. This development is situated near to a bus stop for the goods bus service. There are car club vehicles not far away, and many residents in this area of the city regularly cycle the 2 miles to the city centre. I would like to see some more creative thinking about the access to these properties and encourage the committee to find a way to achieve this. I'll move on to the final speaker, which is Lee Vincent, if Lee would like to come up speaking in support in this agency application. You can just check that the microphone's on with the green light showing.
Can, yes, is that working?
Great.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah,
It's green.
thank you very much. You've got 3 minutes, just start when you're ready. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to address you today. The site we're discussing has long languished in a state of disrepair, and today we come before you with a proposal that seeks to breathe new life into this neglected space. Our application puts forth plans for 5 smaller dwellings designed to align with a sustainable location and to minimise any impact on the broader conservation area. These proposed properties, in terms of size, mirror the majority of residences along Main Street. As highlighted by officers in the committee report, an application was initially submitted in November 22 and received approval in March 23. However, this decision underwent a review, leading to the realisation that certain conditions should have been attached to the original approval, specifically addressing drainage, archaeology and ecology. This process has taken a substantial 10 months to resolve, and it's crucial to note that the applicant had always been committed to meeting the technical requirements associated with these conditions, and the costs imposed by them are minimal compared to the considerable delay incurred. As a small local residential developer, this protracted process has proven frustrating, as the site should have been developed and homes occupied, if not for the overturning of the original decision on a technicality. The existing structures on the site are in a deplorable state, with buildings at the rear deemed so unsafe that they're uninsurable. Our proposal seeks to rejuvenate the front buildings, bringing them back into use while responsibly replacing the unsafe structures with a sustainable new home to the rear. Collaborating closely with officers, we've taken measures to minimise the impact on the conservation area, resulting in little change to the street scene. Importantly, the proposed development maintains the existing mass on the site and, in fact, brings about an overall reduction with a revised layout that includes residential amenity spaces as well as adequate cycle and bin storage and resident parking. A noteworthy issue on the existing site is the lack of proper parking facilities, with the hard standing to the rear proving insufficient for parking and also turning around. This forces any vehicles that enter the site to reverse onto Main Street, posing safety concerns. Our proposed design addresses this concern by providing on-site resident parking with a layout that allows residents to enter and exit the site in a forward gear, eliminate the need to reverse onto Main Street. Larger vehicles will service the site from roadside. This is a well-established practice, with over 100 properties on Main Street currently being serviced in this way with no issue. On-site turning for larger vehicles just isn't possible and would compromise parking and amenity at the rear to an unworkable level. In conclusion, our proposals aim to revitalise this derelict and vacant site, providing much-needed homes in a sustainable location. We politely request that members agree with officers' recommendation to approve this time with the appropriate conditions attached. Thanks for your time, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the agent? Yeah, Councillor Clark, please.
Thanks, Chair. It's been raised in a couple of the previous speakers about accessibility, particularly how the properties will be accessed from the rear, and how dangerous potentially that is. I was just wondering and basically people walking or cycling from the back to the front along that road there, just what are your thoughts? I mean, has much thought been put into how access for pedestrians and cyclists?
Well, I mean, the access is 6 metres wide existing, and the road surface is 3.6 metres, and there is a sort of just over a metre either side to be able to. I think the 1.2 metres on the right, we're assuming would be used by pedestrians, and the metre to the left would be used to present bins and the like on bin day. I mean, it's a difficult one because it's an existing site at the end of the day that we're trying to work with as best we can. I think the existing access, the front door at the front, is a stepped approach as it stands, and so the going via the ramp or the road, the existing access to the rear, we can provide then level access to all of the properties, and obviously you can exit your vehicles and provide level access to all 5 properties from that central courtyard. I mean, we've been through it with our approved inspector and building control. We've tried to create as much of a improvement as is possible, but when you're working with a tight site that's got existing constraints, we've tried to do as much as we can to improve accessibility ultimately. But that's probably about as much as I can say.
thank you. Yeah, Councillor Bassey, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question. My understanding is that this was a dairy once.
A long time ago, yeah.
How did vehicles go in and come out then? Because I can't believe they were reversing out onto Fulford Main Street.
Well, I know it may
Very
look like
different
I've been around a while, but I'm not. I'll be honest. I'm not sure how it was. I mean, I think historically the site's been developed. So St Oswald's Court next door was probably developed in the late 20th century, which I'm sure was formed part of the wider site historically. But I think there's always been an issue with vehicles pulling onto site and reversing off site. But I'll be honest, as far as I can remember, and I've been living in the city for a fair amount of time, I think the houses to the front and the outbuildings to the rear have been used on a sort of low level rather than necessarily on a commercial scale. I think there was also a bungalow built in the rear, which may have also formed part of the dairy facility going back a number of years. But yeah, so I'm not entirely sure, I'm afraid.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so if you would like to take a seat again.
Thanks.
We'll move, before we move into discussion, does there any further questions for officers at this time? I just have one, just some clarification about, do we have dimensions for the access? Just because seems to be a bit of discrepancy between some speakers and others. Yeah, while we're getting that measured, Councillor Melly, you have a question, please.
Thanks, Chair. Another question about the plans. I was just wondering if you could show us where the cycle storage is, please.
I can't magnify a slide and use a pointer at the same time. So, yeah, use my hand. So the cycle stores are 1, 2, 3, 4, and then an integral one in the new dwelling.
So they all covered?
Yes, but there is a condition. I'm not sure we've got an elevation of them, but there is there's conditions actually.
It's condition 14. It just says it needs to be installed in accordance with the plans.
Sorry, they have a door. You'd expect them to have a roof. If members want us really to belt and braces it, roof and door it, then we could amend that condition to make that clear. But I'm pretty sure that is the intention.
Yeah.
So in terms of dimensions, just want to show on with the pointer from the terrace. Oh. So from the terrace here across there is approximately 5 meters. And then the access point here is approximately 3.7 meters. So 3.7 and 5 there. Is that okay?
Yeah. That's great, thank you. Okay, don't see any other questions at this time. Councillor Bassey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just pick up the points we've had made by the speakers. There seems to be some kind of some conflict between paragraph 1.3, which talks about what and will not be demolished. Is it paragraph? Yes, demolition of extensions and outbuildings. Can you confirm, please, what is being proposed here? From the drawings, it looks like the ground floor of numbers 101, 102 remain the same, and the first floor will be transformed. Does that require demolishing? Does it require retaining the bricks? I'm not clear in my own mind as to whether these buildings are being demolished or not.
A demolition plan on the board, on the screen rather. So the areas in red are the areas to be demolished. So that's ground floor. So the entirety of the what we call the former commercial building, and then the additions to the rear, and then at ground floor level, the rear walls and the internals of the number 100 and 102. The first floor, again, it's the entirety of the inside, but the areas of the first floor rear wall are being retained. And then I think at roof level, it's in terms of the roof, it's the area of the hip to gable. So the internals of the building will be entirely removed. And then we have the new internal walls to create 4 out of the 2. And then that demolished rear wall at ground floor level allows that rear extension, which gives extra ground floor space at the rear. But at first floor,
So from the point of
first floor,
view of the aspect
that rear
from
wall
the front,
stays.
sorry to interrupt. What I'm trying to get at is when looking at these buildings from the front, what will be seen? Will the facade on Main Street look the same at the ground floor, or will it be different? Is it going to be raised to the ground and built up? I'm still not entirely clear. I see the internal walls in the back, all of that I understand. It's how the building presents to Fulford Main Street that I'm interested in.
So this is the Main Street elevation.
Yeah.
So I can flip back to the as existing or the photographs, but new windows, new render, and works of general renovation. But that's it in terms of the front elevation. We go back to the sorry. Yeah. So there's the drawing, the as existing drawing. So that hip to gable there is the most significant change in terms of the appearance. The rest is really renovation and repair largely, but that does involve, re-rendering and new windows.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Fenton, please. Just to clarify on mind the bat situation. So am I right in thinking that if approval were granted, nothing could happen until the necessary license had been granted by Natural England and had been received by the council? Is that?
Yes, that's
kind of enshrined in the conditions of approval?
That's in the conditions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So in that case, we'll move through to discussion. In this case, specifically on the officer recommendation as it stands. Would anyone like to start us off? with discussion or Councillor Fenton, please. I think the point's been made, it is a constrained site. I think that certainly you wouldn't build it with those dimensions, particularly in relation to the access point, but without further significant changes to the main fabric of the building, I'm not sure what you could do to improve that situation. I think that will all, whatever happens to the building, the constrained access will always be a feature. So it's clearly suboptimal, but I'm not sure what could be done differently. Obviously, the proposals would introduce more car parking on site than is currently the case, but that's because the number of dwellings is being increased. So yes, that would lead to a potential conflict between cycles, pedestrians, and motorised vehicles. But again, I'm not sure what mitigation there could be other than perhaps some kind of road, some treatments on the driveway to limit speeds in terms of some form of speed humps within the site is something that I think potentially could or perhaps should be considered to help. But then would that cause problems if you're on a cycle having to go over humps? And there's I suppose every potential mitigation has a potential downside. I think what's proposed is a fairly drastic intervention in terms of what is currently there, but the fact that the facade of the building remains largely intact and is visually improved in comparison to what currently exists is obviously a benefit, and bringing the site back into productive use for housing is clearly a benefit that I think does carry significant weight. So as things stand, I'm minded to support the officer recommendations and welcome others' views. Yeah, thank you. Councillor Belly.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I agree with that. The access to the site couldn't very easily be changed without quite large alterations. But I think the issue is that this proposed development increases the use of the site due to doubling the number of dwellings, doubling the number of vehicle movements, doubling the number of people wanting to walk and cycle safely to their home. But I think I'm still minded to approve with the officer recommendation because it's not such a high level of traffic as to cause serious enough issues to be grounds to refuse it. Looking at the proposed conditions about protecting bats and bat habitats, I was just wondering whether that condition needs to be firmed up a little bit, be made a little bit stronger. I'm just wondering something, so it's condition 3 on page 142, instead of, it says demolition and construction works to any buildings within the application site shall not commence unless the local planning authority has been provided with either, and then goes to all the licenses. Instead of just being provided with, I was wondering whether it needs to be something like confirmed receipt of suitable licenses, something like that.
I think the licenses will be the official document from the government's advisor on from Natural England.
But I think
I'm
that,
not quite sure what else we'd expect from them.
well, I just think that the planning authority needs to have definitely received it and confirmed that it is all the correct sort of licenses, not just that the applicant needs to have submitted it.
Yes, this condition is telling the applicant what they need to do. So they need to provide it to us. They can't do anything else other than provide it to us. And if they don't provide it, then they've not satisfied the condition.
Do they not need some sort of confirmation that it has been received?
No.
We
I don't
would,
think so.
they'd have to submit it through a discharge of conditions application. So they'd submit it to us. We have 6 weeks to then say, yes, that's okay. And we give them a written confirmation of receiving it and it's approved.
Okay, so they wouldn't be able to commence construction or demolition straight away as soon as it's submitted. They'd need to wait for up to 6 weeks, however long it takes for the discharge of condition to be confirmed.
Yes.
Okay. Apart from that, yeah, I'm minded to agree with the officer recommendation.
Yeah, Councillor Bassey, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've listened obviously to everything everyone else is saying. I want to focus only on the ecology here. I think it's really unfortunate that we set this thing up as a kind of battle between wildlife and human beings. There doesn't have to be a battle at all. We can take measures to protect and enhance biodiversity at very little cost and all move forwards. What I think is a problem is when we pay lip service to change, or we require others to pay lip service to change and don't implement real action. So I get concerned when I see there's a condition that works can't happen between this date and this date to ensure nesting birds are protected from harm, without there ever being any clear indication who's going to monitor what's going on and whether anything is ever protected. I get concerned when I just see at least 2 bird boxes, at least 1 bat box. Again, because it doesn't feel like we're approaching this from a position of wanting to protect wildlife and enable wildlife to cohabit with human beings in these kinds of settings. So I would like to suggest that, given what has been said by the ecology officer, that list of requirements should say as many bat boxes as are deemed to be required by the results of the survey. Because it's clear that there hasn't been a very thorough survey. If it requires 2 bat boxes or 3 bat boxes, the cost is negligible. I can't see that the developer would say, I refuse to see 2 bat boxes. We've got an expert who's going to look at this and make a determination as to what's required. Can we just have the condition that the number of bat boxes is determined as a result of that? Similarly with the bird boxes, can we include, as we've said on a number of previous occasions, swift bricks into the construction? Much of this building is going to be dismantled. It costs 150 quid to put in a swift box. Let it just be a matter of course. Why does it have to be a battle of wills to look after nature whilst welcoming new developments?
Thank you. Is there a view on the process by which the license comes back and it says that there is bats, higher amount of bats? Would that necessarily mean that we'd add additional bat boxes at that time? How does that process?
So this is 2 separate issues. Yeah. So the license will go into detail about the mitigation required for the bats. So that's kind of replacement roosting facilities for the bats that have been identified. So we've got a brown long-eared bat. So we need specific type of mitigation for that species, and that with it just being a single bat as well. Natural England will not accept over mitigation. You have a slight increase in your mitigation provision, but you cannot go and have 10s and 20s when you've just new roost sites when you've just got 1 roosting bat. They have and they will reject license applications for over mitigation. So that's one bit of your ecological enhancement work. The second, and that's why we've got the second part of ecological improvements are covered in that biodiversity enhancement plan condition, because that's where the National Planning Policy Framework kicks in for providing ecological enhancements above mitigation. So the ecologists have made specific recommendations for box types based on their findings of the survey work. So they have been to site quite a few times. It's not just a general recommendation. It is based on their findings. And you know, enhancements don't always work if you throw them all in, and you provide lots of different varieties for things that are not necessarily going to be there. So the ecologists have actually made specific recommendations, and I'm happy to kind of support those recommendations based on their findings.
I have to say, I'm not sure I'm any the wiser. We've said on a number of occasions, we'd like to see swift boxes incorporated into construction as a matter of course, because we know that swifts are a threatened species and that it helps to put swift boxes in. What I think I'm hearing there is that if they don't exist, we should just allow that they've disappeared and that's it. Goodbye swifts. I don't see why we have to accept that on the planning committee. And I would simply urge members to consider that we have a duty to ensure that we are enhancing biodiversity in our city. That's part of what we're here for. And as I say, I'm perfectly willing to accept that if the bat survey shows there is only one bat and there's just one bat box, fine. If we are in this, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, we are as part of these conditions accepting that there will be a new appraisal. If that new appraisal shows there are more bats, why would we not want to ensure that the planning condition allowed for more bat boxes? I'm confused. It simply requires saying as many as are determined by the expert to be needed.
We always have to remember that the test of conditions, the conditions have to be necessary. So I guess we're using the survey work that has been that's been provided to us to produce a condition which we consider meets that necessity and reasonableness test.
Yeah. Sorry, I will come to you. Just with I guess at the moment it's worded as at least one type of bat box. So I think if the license come back and requests more, there is provision in the way it's written at the moment to support that. But in terms of swift boxes, I think that sounds like something that you could request in addition to what's being requested there currently. Councillor Waters, sorry.
Just to try and help out, would it not be better if the condition was worded to say something along the lines of proportionate numbers with anything that's found in further surveys? I know that's a clumsy way of doing it, but proportionate is the word that ought to go in.
They're conferring.
Yeah, so the mitigation strategy that goes in with the license application has to be informed by survey data. So you could only base your mitigation on what you've found. So for example, you know, they've got the brown long-eared bat there, so they need to provide mitigation that's appropriate to that species. If they found, if for example, you were in a nice wooded habitat that had lots of other species flying around and foraging, then maybe you'd consider providing other mitigation for those species, but that's not something that's been found here. So the license doesn't necessarily, it does not include enhancement, it only includes mitigation, and that can only be based on your survey data.
Councillor Waters, please.
So what would happen if they actually found more when they surveyed again and we'd limited ourselves? Or would we be better, as the representation says, postponing a decision on this until there'd been the further surveys?
So if they found different things during their surveys to support the license application, obviously they would still need to make a license application and it would be applicable to their findings, but that wouldn't necessarily change in the word, it wouldn't change the wording of our condition really, because obviously they'd still have to apply for the license from Natural England, and then when they have received that after planning permissions granted, then provide that back to us. So I'm not quite sure what answer you want, really. Sorry.
So the license would specify what mitigations they'd need in terms of number of boxes.
Yes,
So if they found that they actually had multiple bats and they needed more than one box, that would
Yeah.
be specified in the license and they'd fit more than one box.
Yeah, so it's a really complicated process, the license application, and you have to provide a very detailed method statement of what you're going to do. So it's not just what you're going to provide at the end. So if you're going to provide a new roost site, new boxes, it's going through the entire methodology of what's going to happen, you know, from the point of starting works on site. So.
Thank you. And I guess the second part to this question, just so we can get kind of close this bit off, in terms of specifying specifically a Swift box where we've got at least two bird boxes currently, is there a situation for specifically specifying a species and interaction? Is that
Yeah, specific species can be recommended, but it should be informed by your site. So I don't think really in this case, with it being quite just a two-story, it's just, you know, it's just got the 2 stories, it necessarily be right for a Swift. Not necessarily. I think it'd be more garden bird species that you'd find in this area. Right. But I think that the enhancement features should be site specific and based on survey data, as opposed to, and I agree that we can, you know, improve and have a few sort of additional things in the hope of attracting new species and new wildlife to areas, but I think it should be realistic as well, and we shouldn't lose out on species that we have, which probably garden species here, for the sake of putting up a Swift box that isn't applicable to the site.
Thank you. Councillor Vassey, please.
Thank you, Jess. Just to move it on then. I mean, I'd be very surprised if there's anyone in this room who doesn't recognise nature's struggling. I'd be very surprised if a developer said, I just couldn't countenance spending 120 quid on a Swift box to be incorporated in the fabric of the building. Can I just suggest that we put we alter that condition and just put at least 2 type bird boxes, at least 1 Schregler type bat boxes, and 2 Swift bricks, and include that in the vote and see whether people support that or not, and then move on. And so,
does that have broad agreement? Okay.
Can I propose that?
Yeah, that's been proposed, and it seems
that's okay then.
broadly
Okay.
agreed. Okay. Would anyone like to add anything in terms of general discussion, or would anyone like to move in terms of formally proposing the recommendation? Okay. Yeah.
I'm happy to propose moving the officer recommendation to approve.
Yeah, thank you. Would anyone like to second that, please? Not seeing anybody, I am happy to second that myself if no one else to do it. From my perspective, it's it's a dense scheme, but I think density in an urban location is a positive in terms of providing new housing, and the access being the way it is. I think we'll have limited vehicle movements through it, and those vehicle movements will be kind of the speed of them is actually reduced by the width of the access in itself. So it produces quite apart from the corner, a fairly safe environment. And the fact that the highways team have not flagged any concerns when they're actually quite safety conscious in the council, perhaps more so than a developer would be, it gives me a lot of confidence that actually they feel that that's a reasonable arrangement. So I'm happy to second that proposal. In that case, Barry, could you take us through it will indeed include.
Thank you, Chair. So the recommendation is on page 41 onwards. So seeking delegated authority for the head of planning and development services to approve the application subject to the section 106 agreement and the planning conditions set out in the schedule on the following pages, subject to the amendment of condition 4 to require swift bricks, 2 swift bricks, in addition to the bird and bat boxes.
Thank you. In that case, can I see all those who would like to vote for the officer recommendation? That's unanimous. So in that case, the officer recommendation is approved and the application is approved as well. We'll take a very short break so that those who've come to speak who aren't speaking on the next item can leave if they'd like. Would anyone like a break generally, more so than a minute? No, exactly. Okay. We'll just give it a minute and then we'll carry on. Okay, we'll pick back up here. Sorry. I can get fixed. That's all right. We'll pick back up here. We're moving on to item 4B, which is the Fulford Flood Alleviation Scheme. I'll ask Gareth again, if please, if we can take us through that. I'll just mention before we start the presentation, we've also been joined by Claire McRae, who is the council's archaeologist. He's advised on this. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. So item 4B, an application for flood alleviation scheme for Germany Beck to address flooding of the Selby Road, Main Street, A19 area, and and Fordlands Road. So the scheme is designed to protect Selby Road, the Fordlands Road residential area, and to maintain access into the Fordland Roads estate area. The site, so this is the A19, Fordlands Road. I'm going to call this Thornton Road, I believe, Thornton Road here. And there's Selby Road Recreation Ground. This is Landing Lane, all of which are referred to in the agenda package. The route of Germany Beck itself, this tree-lined beck, stone arch which goes under the A19 and then off towards the Ouse. And then a slightly more close in image of the proposal. So what's proposed is let's go to there we go. What's proposed is a new pumping station in this area to the east of the A19, and a new access and parking area for maintenance access. A new outfall to the west. So the pumping station outfall, you see that dashed line. That's the new outfall from the pumping station proposed. There's a new flood wall across Germany Beck to the west of the A19. Earth flood embankments. Another earth flood embankment on Landing Lane to fill a depression between the Beck and the higher land to the south. It's a temporary construction, compound and access from Fordlands Road. And then tree works. And tree works will include the removal of 21 trees. So the site is in part in the Fulford Village Conservation Area. So the area hatched in red is the conservation area. West of the A19 and hatched in blue is this site's Fulford Site of Special Scientific Interest. The area is in flood zone 2 and 3. It's in the Greenbelt and is also in an area assumed to be the site of the Battle of Fulford. It's not currently in the register of historic battlefields, but there is a decision on a revised smaller battlefield area being reviewed by Historic England. So let me go through those photographs again. So these are the existing flood walls for the Beck. Site of the pumping station, roughly in this location. The trees to be taken out are pretty much what you see in front of us there. And the new access is in that location. You can see that blue, that's sandbags, which are current flood mitigation. Slightly different shots. So the area was the area of tree removal is in this area here. from the playing field, looking down onto the A19, so you can see the sandbags. Across the playing field, again, the sandbags form a really useful reference points because they're actually a slightly different colour there, so you can orientate yourself. And against a wider view, that line of flood wall there existing, the site of the pumping station, middle shot. So the general site arrangement. So the kiosk, the pumps, the outflow on the other side of the A19, the new flood wall, and the new embankments. Maintenance access taken from here. It gives enough space for a vehicle to turn and exit the site in a forward gear. I think that's been modelled on a skip lorry, because they need to remove debris from the trash screens here. And there's a route of the Germany back and the old stone arch there. The pumping station elevations from the east. From the north, so that shows the screen and the pumps and the kiosk clad in brick. It's from Selby Road, so this is the wall, flood wall, where we saw pointed out the trees that were going to be removed and the access into the parking area. So it's a pumping station, so elevated up above the relevant flood level. It's a pumping station elevation. At the pumping station section towards Selby Road. So again, there's the wall, the existing stone arch culvert. Pumping station section towards the playing field. So you see the control kiosk, the pumps, and the outfall to Germany back. Just get some air and some idea of what we're looking at through the site. So on the other side, so this is the west side of Main Street looking east. So this is the outfall from the pumps, and then the penstock, which controls the flow of Germany back during times of flood. So visualization of what's proposed. The landing lane embankment. So this area of embankment here shows a photograph. So roughly in this position. Tree removal. Difficult to see, but so you can see the pumping station. The control kiosk and the pumps here. So the trees to be removed are these red dotted trees. It's that whole area. Significant area of tree removal, but read in the report in terms of the planning balance and the necessity in terms of the location. And that's the end of the presentation. There is an update, a written update. So Natalie, thanks.
Yep, so in terms of updates, we received an additional objection on the 9th of January 2024, and those grounds have been summarised in your update sheet. They're mainly on archaeology and landscaping concerns. We do need to update a couple of the planning conditions. Condition 4, which is archaeology related, needs to be split into 2 separate conditions. That was just a typological error. And then condition 6, Also, it needs to be updated to remove the words "the Fulford Battlefield Society and other interested parties." This is because we can't consult these parties as part of a discharge of conditions. However, we recommend an informative that the applicant consults these parties before submitting the scheme of interpretation to the council for approval. We have assessed the additional information and the officer's recommendation remains for approval subject to the conditions set out in the report and as amended above. Thank you.
Thanks. Looking at moving to questions and clarification on the plans, one thing I will mention is that the application has been put forward by the council. Typically, we'd be joined by Steve Ragg, the flood risk manager, but as applicant, he'll be speaking as the applicant. So technical questions in terms of the operation of the flood barrier need to be directed at that point if you want to ask questions of a technical manner in terms of the flood defences. Does anyone have any questions on the plans before we go to public participation? Yeah, Councillor Vassy, please.
Just a quick one, thank you, Chair. You didn't show us which trees would be taken out on the west side of the A19 when you were showing the trees marked in red on your plan. It showed trees on the east side, but not on this.
No, you're right, I didn't. No conspiracy intended. So these are trees marked generally red hatching. So where the flood wall is proposed to be built. So best way to show this. So the trees in this general area, well, not necessarily the ones I'm showing, this general area on the other side, the western side of the A19. And generally here, so you can see Germany Beck there. So the flood wall is there. So these are the trees in this area to be removed. Afraid we don't have a street level photograph, I'm afraid.
To make sure I've understood, because it seems there's a bund being created next to Landing Lane.
Yeah, that didn't.
Are those trees that we're seeing in the middle of the picture, are they all staying or are they all going?
Yes, they stay. So the Landing Lane bund doesn't necessitate the removal of the tree. There is a note, a take care note around the crown spread of that one, but that's yeah, those trees in that group. Oh, okay, sorry, there's part removal of that. What is G25, do we know? So it's a group of sycamore, so yes, one of them here is removed.
Any questions? Councillor Waters, please.
Given the concerns that's just been expressed about tree loss, won't we be better with conditions 11 and 12 being for the lifetime of the development or in perpetuity? It's 10 years isn't really a long span for the replacement planting, which, you know, could conceivably come under pressure in 10 years' time.
Yes, I mean the 10 years allows them to grow and thrive and become established, and they're also on third-party land. So the ones on this side are parish council land, and then yeah, so that was the reason, and they'd be managed in the same way that the parish council manage the rest of their estate, really. So we weren't proposing to impose a condition that required any longer, that sort of maintaining their estate in the same way that the city council maintain and alter public open spaces from time to time as their use develops, I guess.
It wasn't so much the parish council future maintenance that concerned me. It was just, should anybody come along in the future wanting to extend the engineering works, I think the more protection the replacement trees have, the better. And I'm sure, the parish council are speaking, I'm sure they wouldn't mind a condition in perpetuity, those replacement trees.
Yeah, we can discuss this as part of the discussion phase. If that's something you want to do. I'm not seeing any other questions at this time. We'll move into public participation. Find the first one. The first speaker is Andrew Viveers of Fulford Parish Council. Please, if you join us. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just start when you're ready.
Okay, I'm Andrew Viveers, Parish Councillor of Fulford. Just for the record, I'm also a member of the Who's and Do and IDB. We have submitted with regard to this application, and we are supportive of the installation of a pumping station. Only recently we've had flooding, and it's been necessary to have portable pumps installed and a temporary footbridge to protect the people of Fordlands Road. So we want a permanent solution to this. However, there are a couple of points that I'd like to bring up which are relevant to this. We've submitted a written submission, which is somewhat longer, and I'm only going to tell you two of the things that's wrong there. Loss of trees, which we're talking about already here. Damage to biodiversity. We would like to see replacement trees where inevitably certain trees have to be removed. We'd like to see replacement trees, but mature specimens, not whips, which could take years to develop. And there's one particular tree which I can't see that map because it's too far away from my eyesight, but there's a T19 on one of these, which is an ash tree. It's quite large, but I think it's right on the border between the actual development and the field. I'm not sure at this point whether that's retainable, but we'd like as much as possible for the developer to retain this if it can be done. Otherwise, to be replaced by a mature specimen and maintained for as long as necessary. I quite like the idea that we be maintained in perpetuity. So if that's a possible condition, then that's even better. Right, loss of trees. The next one, and this is our main concern. We're losing open space. This is taking place on a chunk of Fordlands Road playing field, and we're having this land taken away from us. We'd like to see a replacement for that, and so we've asked for this already in our submission. We'd like to have further discussion to be held regarding alternative compensatory land made available. If that can be placed as a condition on the grant, is providing you do decide to grant permission for the whole thing, that would be very desirable to us.
Okay,
I'm finished. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I like to ask any further questions to the speaker? Councillor Carr, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of things on the replacement land. Two questions of that. Have you got some land in mind already identified? And second, would that be for recreational purposes? Because I know you talk a bit in your submission about how it is actually usable land as well. The bit that's been lost around Germany Bay.
Well, the land we've got at the moment is recreational land on the corner of Fordham's Road Field. Yeah, so if that's removed, we do need something to compensate for that. Is that the answer you're seeking? I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, it's called recreational purposes.
Yes, it would
So
be,
it's
yes,
supplementary.
yeah.
Well, that's my second
It
one.
would be open space land, yes.
And then I guess my first question was, have you already identified land? Or have you already identified a bit of land?
No.
No, okay, thank you.
Thanks. Councillor Waters, please.
It's more a question for Gareth while the speaker's still sat there. Is it possible to condition such an arrangement, or would it have to be an informative requiring discussions between the applicant and the parish council to,
In terms of the replacement?
yeah,
I think we'd have to. What we can't do is impose a condition which effectively refuses the planning permission through condition. So I think we would have to have some reasonable. We'd have to be reasonably assured that there is some land in Fulford which is available for that purpose, that is perhaps CYC owned and could be transferred to the parish council. Because if that land doesn't exist, then the condition is effectively torpedoes the scheme as a whole. You will have read our officer's view over the issue of replacement land. We don't think in the planning balance it's necessary, but it wouldn't be unlawful to require it as long as we can be reasonably sure that there is some available. There is also obviously there's a separate outside of the planning process, the negotiation from the city council to take presumably purchase that land anyway. That runs separate to the planning application process.
so going back to the speaker then, are you aware of any City of York Council land that is available in the reasonable locality?
Not City of York land, no.
Okay. Councillor.
Can you just confirm you're asking for further consultation,
Yes, indeed.
not a block on the development?
No, absolutely not. No. This is something which I would expect to happen fairly soon, though. Afterwards, not something that you build it and then discuss it. I would really like to be discussing it fairly soon, if that can be put on as a condition.
I think this will come back. We'll come back to this in the discussion phase rather than keep you sat there while it's going on. Does anyone have any further questions for the speaker? While no. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. The next speaker is Councillor Kate Revilius again, and again she's provided a statement which I will read out on her behalf. I'm ward councillor for Fulford and Heslington, and I'd like to offer my support for this scheme. Residents of the Fordland Road community have lived with the threat of their homes being flooded and the travel disruption associated with Fordland Road's flooding for far too long. This scheme will provide reliable access to a community of over 300 homes and protect some 43 properties from flooding. In addition, it will keep the A19 open, a vital arterial road connecting York with the A64. It's important that this scheme is progressed in conjunction with local stakeholders, and with this in mind, I would like the committee to consider the following conditions. Firstly, I'd like the reassurance that the loss of open space is renegotiated with Fulford Parish Council and future land ownership is established with priority. And secondly, I'd like the committee to include the conditions requested by the council archaeologist, which I'll outline in brief here and which can be found in full at the end of the archaeology report uploaded to the planning portal on the 3rd of April 2023. One, no development of archaeological investigation shall take place until a written scheme of investigation for all outlined archaeological works has been submitted to and approved by the local planning authority in writing. Condition imposed in accordance with section 16 of MPPF. Number 2, a programme of archaeological building recording is required. Condition is imposed in accordance with section 16 of MPPF and policy D7 of the draft local plan. And thirdly, a scheme of interpretation relating to the Battle of Fulford is required. Thank you for allowing me this time to share with you. Okay. I think we'll come back to the requests around the conditions later. That's part of the discussion. So we'll move on to the final speaker, speaking in support of the applicant, Steve Ragg, if you can join us, please. It's the council flood officer.
Good evening, members of the committee. I'm Steve Ragg, Flood Risk Manager, City of York Council. I'm the project manager for this application. I think everyone's aware of the flood risk issues in this location in the city, as colleagues from the parish council alluded there, and Councillor Revilius. There's been recent flooding just this winter alone. 5 named storms caused significant operational response in that location. This scheme is designed to mitigate that and reduce the likelihood of that happening again, vastly reduce the amount of operational response that's required, and safeguard and give reassurances to that committee. The flood risk at this location is predominantly from the River Ouse. The higher river levels in the River Ouse make their way back into Germany Beck and into the Tunnel Drain, which is a tributary of Germany Beck, which goes into the Fordlands community. And the solution is essentially very similar to other solutions elsewhere in the city. Take the Foss Barrier, for example. This is a much, much smaller version of that, of course, but you have a structure that stops high river levels coming back into a tributary and then pumps, which will keep the levels low in that tributary. And the same sort of approach is evident on Burdyke and Holgate Beck and different parts of the city. So the solution, as which has been led through by planning colleagues, shows that there's a pumping station there on the east side of the A19. Penstocks close the west side of the river where it comes under the A19 to stop the River Ouse coming back upstream, and those pumps pump the levels through to keep the levels lower. There will still be high river levels in the Germany Beck catchment, but they will be held at a level which will be below the Fordlands Road Bridge and below the outfall of Tunnel Drain, allowing Fordlands Road to be maintained dry and Tunnel Drain to drain effectively without any water backing up there. We already have flood defences on the A19, which were part and parcel of the delivery of the Thornton Road access road by Persimmon Homes. That was part of Planning Gain at the time. It allowed us to use their operatives whilst on site to extend the retaining walls of the highway to form an effective, but not as complete as we would like, flood defence. So at present, we still have to carry out pumping there. Our scheme would pull all of those things together. The drainage of Tunnel Drain, keeping down levels on Fordlands Road, the localised drainage there around the A19, and it would be a coherent response there. We recognise the impacts. We recognise the biodiversity issues. We found the European eel as part of our surveys, and we've had to redesign it with National Environment Agency fisheries specialists. We've tried to site it as low as possible within that area of the land, and we do recognise the concerns of the parish council, and we believe that we've done as much to mitigate that as possible. And archaeology has been something where we've brought forward many other surveys and worked with the Battlefield Society to try to minimise the impacts that it will bring. So to finalise, I think we can all see the benefits that this will bring in terms of the A19, which is a main arterial link to the city, a community that can be stranded for days or longer at a time, and direct impact to more than 40 properties. And hopefully committee can find it to approve this scheme as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? The only question, obviously, there's been discussion around alternative spaces for a public open space. I wanted to know what discussions the council's had around that and well, what the situation is there, I guess, if anything else happened so far.
Yeah, throughout the last few years, I've met with colleagues in the parish council on quite a few occasions. We've held drop-in sessions for not just the parish council, but also for the community. And we've had many discussions on the position and the placement of the scheme. And we've always recognised that we are habitating an area of parish council land. So we've always said that planning permission is the first step to show that we've got a scheme that will work and will mitigate and minimise the impacts on the wide range of things that we always look for within planning applications. But we've always recognised that there will be further agreements that we will need to be held with the parish regarding the long-term placement of the pumping station there. So, you know, we were always prepared that planning permission was only the first step. Those discussions would be the next stage involving City of York Council estates, legal colleagues, and obviously the parish council. Through those discussions, the parish has raised the idea of alternate sites. And I'll be honest, I will be led by the decisions of this committee and the informatives or conditions that the committee agrees today. But if, you know, the committee is minded to say that one solution would be trying to find an alternate placement for that open space, then that's, you know, that commitment from myself to carry on working with the parish on all aspects of approvals and, you know, decisions that need to be made, you know, I will continue that discussion. But you know, at the minute, the officer's reports, you know, takes one stance, but I would be steered by the findings of the committee as to that discussion that took place just before I came to the table, really. If an alternate provision is seen as the right thing to do, then that will be part of my discussions.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waters, I'll come to you first, sorry.
Will you also commit to work with the parish council as to seeing what can be done to save T19, given it's a mature ash? Obviously, you're not going to get a replacement ash if it is lost.
Yeah, I do have someone from our consultancy here, ACOM, who've done the tree surveys. So this is Indy, and I can't remember with the T19 whether or not there was any leeway around that. But if wherever we can tweak things and change things, we've got a red line boundary there to obviously take all aspects on board, you know, regarding the access road and things. And if things could be done to actually save trees, then we will do what we can, councillor, of course. I can't remember with T19 just how tight it was around that one and how likely and necessary it was to remove that. But we would commit to not just replace, you know, any trees that are lost, but wherever possible, try to retain if possible. You know, that's good practice as we move to the construction phase.
Thanks. Councillor Bassey, did you still?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd just like to ask why all this wasn't incorporated when Thornton Road and that junction was done at the start. I'm trying to remember when it happened. I think it was about 8 to 10 years ago. Why wasn't that considered? And if it had been incorporated into that scheme, might we have seen a lower environmental impact to achieve the results we're looking to achieve today?
Yeah, the discussions with Persimmon regarding the Germany Beck development go back a long way, as many people will be aware. And discussions regarding the access to the site and the impacts that brought specifically, and the wider site, of course, you know, have gone through many iterations and have gone outside of this room and to higher places, as everyone will be aware. But the long and the short of it is essentially the developers identified that by building Thornton Road, it took up some of the floodplain there. It's for flood zone 3. And they needed to compensate for that, for the loss of floodplain, which is an essential MPPF requirements. So there are a sequence of retaining ponds as you go further up Germany Beck towards the university, which are designed as compensatory storage to mitigate the impact of Thornton Road. What they did find through their assessment was there was no increase through their development, whether it's Thornton Road itself or the development as a whole. There was no increase in flood risk to the A19 or to Fordlands Road or the Fordlands community. So therefore it was outside of, you know, anything they was required of them in terms of planning game. What we did have, and this goes back a long way, I've been here 11 years and it predates my involvement in any of these planning issues. There was an element of Section 106 attached to the project with regards to flood resilience for the A19. And in reality, it was a rather small amount in present day terms, in actual financial value. But what we managed to do when the developers were on site building essential retaining walls for where Thornton Road meets the A19, and then on the other side of the road, we got them to work with us to actually extend them in extent a little bit, to actually put a more cohesive concrete core in places. They also, I don't know if you noticed when Gareth showed the picture of Landing Lane, got them to raise the tarmac so into essentially a supersized speed bump, and that's up to the flood level. So we did get them to put in place a whole range of flood resilience improvements where they were already carrying out highways retaining works. But it wasn't the full solution. We still need to put pumps in there to pump the localized drainage where it comes down around the corner. We still need to put something in place to block up the area where the pump station will be. So it wasn't the full solution. So no, we couldn't have forced or requested or instructed Persimmons to do these works as part of their development because they simply weren't increasing these risks and therefore the impacts. But what we did do is we utilised one aspect of that was targeted towards flood resiliency A19 and got to them to do more. If we could have got them to do it as part of the works, would it have made it better? I can't remember the exact phrase, Councillor, so apologies. But would it have reduced the environmental harm? I think you were saying, weren't you? And that's where AECOM did a piece of work earlier last year to actually look at the siting of this. With a pumping station like this, you can either put it upstream or downstream of the thing you want to keep dry, or you can put it on either side of the beck. And we looked at the constraints here. We've obviously got the triple SI on the other side. We've got the conservation area on both sides of the north. And then we've got the potential battleground sites, obviously on that side of the river. And a multi-criteria analysis was made of all of that to actually see which was the sites that was best for the placement, included also hydraulically what was the best placement for it, where it could be designed best to be most effective in the most efficient way. And all of those things ended up with this as the preferred site. So if others had have done that, if Persimmons had have done that as part of their work, they would have more than likely come up with the same siting and the same sort of general arrangement.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Just two quick questions for me on archaeology. One, would you be able to kind of explain the interaction with Fulford battlefield and where that's pros having received this information? I guess if one was in relation to the proposed conditions put forward by Councillor Alleviation, are you happy that they're covered in the conditions in the report? I guess.
It's covered, sorry?
The conditions discussed in the statement, which we mentioned, I could share these.
You mean the amendments?
The amendments.
Yes,
yeah,
I'm happy with the amendments. One was simply just a typo error where two of my conditions had been run together, and I understand the amendments to condition 6, was it?
Yeah.
About the interpretation. I understand the reasoning for that.
Okay, so that'll just be picked up. Thanks. Yes. Yeah, there was those three, but yeah, I think they've been. Sorry, and then the in relation to Fulford battlefield and how that relates to the site and what the view is essentially.
Yeah, the pumping station is situated in what you would call the heart of the assumed battlefield site. The site is under review by Historic England for the second time for potential designation for the Register of Battlefields. That work is completely separate to this planning application. I have discussed the site when this first came up at pre-application and and over time since then with Historic England and the specialists who are specifically assessing the battlefield. And we all agree, myself and Historic England, that the proposed pumping station as it is here before us tonight will not impact upon the ability to make that decision on designation. So the site was put forward for designation 10 or so years ago and turned down by Historic England, and that was due to securing enough evidence to securely locate the battle at that site. But since then, Fulford Battlefield Society have been able to produce more evidence which supports their claim that this is indeed the site of the battle. And that is why Historic England are again considering that, and that we're just waiting on some peer reviews, basically some independent reviews of the work from the Battlefield Society. So, but it has been agreed that the visual impact of this scheme will not stop the designation of that site, should Historic England agree that there is sufficient evidence this time round.
Thank you. Are there any other questions this time for the applicant? Okay, in that case, I'm happy for you to take a seat. Thank you. Does anyone have any further questions at this time for officers? Councillor Melly.
Thanks, Chair. I'm just trying to understand what the view of the development on the east side will be from the east. You showed us a picture of the site as it is now, kind of looking across the field towards those conveniently placed sandbags. But in terms of there'll be a new bank built, does that obscure the view? I think in the report it says it obscures the view of the pumping station, but not the control kiosk. I was just trying to understand like the different relative levels and how they'll be obscured.
How high the bunds are. Is that on the drawing? So this is an elevation. What? Yeah. So this is the elevation from the playing field. So I think, as I explained when we went through the presentation, that the kiosk stands roughly at the same height of the coping stone from the flood wall, the existing flood wall, and you can see there where we can't see because it's not a section, but you can see there the pipes from the pumps, and they're obviously raised above slightly above that level. The kiosk sits at a higher point, but a lot of the workings are effectively underground. So the bund will have some screening impact. There's also, what's going on there? Sorry, need the right drawing. So the earth embankment does wrap around, but it's an area at the moment it's treed, and there won't be trees in this area. There will be a woodland belt planted to try and mitigate that change in the view. I'm afraid we don't have the planting plan on the drawings, but Natalie, can you just show me that plan? The planting plan. Do you have a hard copy? No. It's okay. So the woodland, the new woodland planting goes in an arc within the red line boundary, and then finishes around here. So there's that that mitigation to the view across the playing fields. And then there is a proposal outside of this application. There's you might be aware of the Environment Agency mitigation measures, the 1 to 5 tree replanting, and I think there is a proposal for tree planting in this location according to the drawing that we've submitted, we've had submitted to us. So that's a separate to this. But yeah, there's no denying that because of its location, because of the raised level of the kiosk, that's a significant change to the appearance, especially from the road here. But it's the only show in town, really, in terms of flood alleviation, what we're trying to achieve.
Councillor Waters, please.
Just to assist and move it on, I quite happily recommend approval, subject to us agreeing some of these amended conditions. Of course, I would imagine everybody will agree the amended archaeology conditions. I'd just like to return back to conditions 11 and 12. You heard from Fulford Parish Council, they would be quite content to see those conditions reworded for the lifetime of the development or in perpetuity, whichever one you choose. And I'm not doubting in any way Steve's sincerity, because he's give us an excellent appraisal there, but I still think there ought to be an informative along the lines of that the applicant will work with the parish council to best endeavours to retain T19. And of course, as I say, it'll have to be an informative rather than a condition.
Yeah, thank you for that. Sorry, I think that Councillor Malley.
Sorry, Chair, I still have another question for officers before we move on to debate.
No, if you want to ask that question.
Thank you. It was just about the temporary construction compound, because usually when we have an application for temporary planning permission, it's quite specific about how long it's for, and I just couldn't see anything in the application or the conditions or the requirements of the construction environment management plan about exactly how long that compound will be there for. Or even roughly how long it will be there for, actually.
If there isn't, we can, yeah, condition requiring the compound and the temporary haul road to be removed on so the woodland trees. Okay. Right. Okay. Do you want to ask the question?
We can word a condition to remove the temporary access and roads and things, but there is landscape imposed in some of those areas where the road's going to be. So the woodland belt is near the temporary construction road, and we've asked for that woodland belt to be planted within 6 months. So we could tie in a condition to remove all the construction road before the planting that we need. How could we word it?
Well, the condition 11 requires the landscape layouts to be implemented within a period of 6 months within the practical completion of the development, which I guess that from what Natalie says, that will require that they can't implement the landscaping condition without removing the compound and the construction road. So it's probably not necessary to have another condition saying you have to remove the road, because they have to remove the road because they won't be able to implement the landscaping.
Yeah, because usually you don't have to implement the whole of a planning application. It can be implemented in part. But there
No,
is-
but in this case, they have to. So 11 is a requirement that they implement the landscaping layout plan within 6 months of the practical completion of development. So they've breached the planning permission because there's a condition specifically requiring that landscaping to be implemented.
Could we tie it in with that condition as well? So saying all temporary things needs to be removed within 6 months of completion? Because I know some parts of the land don't cover all the landscaping areas.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, it's always tied up with what's necessary. But to be completely sure that everything's removed, you could add a sentence to condition 11 to require that.
Sorry, so the landscape layout plan that's referenced in condition 11 as being completed within 6 months of the completion of the development, that same layout plan is part of the development. It's one of the plans referenced in condition 2 as being part of the development.
Yes.
So, I mean, probably not a problem, but it doesn't really make sense that they have to complete that layout within 6 months of having completed that layout. Sorry, doesn't.
I don't think it's a problem
Yeah,
that it's in both places. But yeah, it's not a problem that it's in the plans condition. But if it needs to be, it needs to be in condition 11 because that's the trigger condition that requires it to be done. If we just had it listed in condition 2 and then didn't have any other conditions saying it had to go ahead, then that comes back to your issue about they don't have to complete. So that requires them to complete.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy with all that then. Thanks.
Thank you. I think we are now definitely moving into discussion. Is that right? Yes. Yeah. Councillor Bassey, if you'd like to carry on from where Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, first of all, I note 5.59 refers to a recommendation there should be fish-friendly pumps because there are eels in the back. I don't see anything in the recommendations and conditions to suggest that that's a requirement. Am I missing something? 5.59 says to include appropriate engineering, i.e. fish-friendly pumps. And then when we get to the conditions on biodiversity, there's nothing in there. So I'm just wondering if it's somewhere else.
At 5.59, we've asked for a finalised construction environmental management plan, which is a CEMP, which has been conditioned at 7. So the fish-friendly pumps will be approved via condition 7 within the CEMP, if that helps.
Sorry, so where is it in the conditions? Or is it conditioned? Are you saying that it's contained within the finalised CEMP that has to be produced?
Okay. Would you like to
if it helps, Chair, there is reference in condition 15. Oh, right, okay. Condition 15 relates to machinery and plant, so it might be in there that it would be expected to be
Condition
found.
15 is a noise condition. The fish-friendly pumps are specified on the design drawings. So they're part of the scheme. They're part of the scheme drawings. I'm not sure I can. Fish-friendly low flow pump. There. So they're specified in
So
the
it's in there.
design.
It's hard to see.
It's part
that,
of the design,
I have to
yes.
say.
Yeah.
You're forgiven.
You're telling me.
The other observations I'd like to make, Chair, are relating to trees, and quite a few things have been said so far. For me, I've been coming down that road since I was a kid. And one of the things that is a characteristic of that road is that it feels almost rural until you're suddenly in Fulford Main Street. And what worries me about what's being proposed is that we're going from something like that to something that, at least for a period of years, is going to look urban. A whole load of trees will have gone. There'll be buildings where there were previously the ings and scrub and vegetation. And the impact of that, for me as an individual, is considerable. When people talk about conservation areas and character of place and all of that. And therefore, I think it's very important that the vegetation that is planted is, as was suggested by the speaker from the parish council, consists of trees that are mature enough to quickly pull that area back to what it looked like previously. When I look at the pumping station itself, I see an ugly building that looks like it could be a garage on an industrial estate, out of keeping with the buildings, in an area that's previously been a triple SI. And I would like to think that we make every move possible to hide that building as quickly as possible. I regret that it appears no one has considered whether that building itself might look better in its environment. Why wasn't cedar cladding involved? Or why isn't there a green roof? Why is it that because it's a utilitarian building, we just treat it like it's a garage and it doesn't matter? In an area which, as I say, is historically, I mean, we hear about the Battle of Fulford, and that's hundreds of years ago. Just going back 40, 50, 60 years ago, this was a rural area. And going back just 10 years before Thornton Road was created, there was triple SI on both sides of the road, as I understand it. That's what I saw when I was driving in and when it flooded. So I'm really keen that the conditions ensure that all the planting brings this area back to what it looks like now as quickly as possible. So mature trees, as has been said by various people, and an attention to helping that building recede so that the view we see when we come into York from the south on the arterial road into the city isn't transformed from one that has an industrial landscape on the right-hand side of the road, but quickly that is masked. So I'm happy to hear other people's expertise and suggestions as to how we make those conditions do that, if that's supported by other people around the table.
I guess it's almost a query for yourselves. Specifying the maturity of, I guess they've put forward the type of tree in their plan. Can we request that they change because obviously there's a cost implication for changing the maturity of a tree species. Is that something we can request as part of a condition, or is that something that it's almost influencing?
Yeah, so the landscaping scheme they put forward, they put a planting schedule forward of 6 silver birch, 3 hawthorn and 3 oak trees between the heights of 250 and 300 centimetres. And this has been designed by a landscape architect, so I can't comment if we can increase the sizes of them at this point. But in terms of the woodland mix, they're doing 2 woodland mixes as well, which is 62 trees in one woodland and 22 trees in another, with of varying heights. But as they've specified the heights on the planting schedule, which we've recommended for approval,
that's
it's
what's
kind of
being
set, the heights are
considered.
set.
But those trees that we're discussing in front of the pumping station are 250 and 300.
Mhm.
So fairly mature species, I guess, compared to a whip. They're not a whip.
Yeah, they're described as light standard, yeah.
Standard. I think the answer is we can't ask them to change the maturity of the tree species in there because that's what's specified in the plan. We can't ask them to change. We can only approve what's in the plan or disagree with what's in the plan. We couldn't ask them to alter the plan that's put forward as part of a condition, essentially, it seems to me. Or do you think differently? That may not be.
Well, you can. That's because if you're unhappy with a part of the proposal, then you can either seek by condition an alternative or seek to defer subject to another planting scheme being submitted if you're unhappy with it. But you have our recommendation and you have the views of the CYC landscape architects within the scheme. So it's, and I think there are always issues with the bigger standards that they have. I think they might be more prone to failure, and they require more. More on-site maintenance. But I'm not an expert on that, so don't take that as well. Wish I hadn't said it. But there is there will be implications in terms of providing more mature planting from the outset that I think the applicants will need to would have to consider. I think, yeah, we'd have to give them the opportunity to consider that, but it is in your hands.
Right. So slightly different to what I said. Sorry, that is that.
Before I pass on to respond to what I think speakers said, we can request that the trees be of a certain height. I'd say if we couldn't do it, why are we here as a committee? You know, the applicant is our own city council, for goodness sake. And the cost of a whip and the cost of a tree is the difference between £5 and 40 quid. So I would certainly urge us to require that the council does what it can with its own application to ensure that it mitigates the time that this development will impact negatively on the visual aspect of the city.
Yeah, Councillor Fenton, please. I'll come to.
Having looked at the planting plans, I think they're appropriate. We're not talking about whips. We're talking about more mature specimens. I agree. If more can be done, I'm sure I would hope it will be. I certainly don't see the proposed height of the trees to be planted as a reason to defer or refuse. I think that would be out of proportion. I think it's been suggested that the condition be toughened in terms of protecting the trees that are planted for the in perpetuity. I haven't heard anything said that would make me think that would be a bad idea or would have adverse or sort of perverse consequences. So I see little harm in adding that. I think in terms of the issues raised around compensatory land being provided elsewhere, I'm a bit queasy about getting too sucked into that debate. particularly as there isn't a piece of land identified as providing that compensation. So I think I don't think we can, and I certainly don't think we should almost require that as a condition of approval, because if the land doesn't exist within the council's ownership, then the scheme can't be delivered. So I think that would be be very unwise. If something can be added in as an informative around the council to continue to engage constructively with the parish council around opportunities for compensatory recreational space provision, I don't see any harm with that, and I don't think that would would undermine the application if approved, but would be very nervous about going any further than that, for reasons that others have said. But on the whole, more than happy to support the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waters, you just want to speak?
I think that was roughly the proposal I made about half an hour ago, but never mind. Just to say that Gareth was entirely correct when he did say that if you were to get, or you were to insist on semi-mature trees, it would increase the maintenance on site. They're not as easy to get established, especially if you're wanting to get a more natural environment and include oak trees. They are very susceptible. They're much easier to plant those small and let them grow. This is going to get approved. Let's be honest. It shouldn't be held up on grounds like that. I'm sure under Steve's auspices, they will make a good job of the landscaping. The main thing to my mind is to make sure that it is protected in perpetuity, because we don't want it getting established and then in 10 years' time somebody upgrading this.
Thanks. I think I suspect everyone broadly agrees, as we've already said. I think the key is that we clear up what conditions and informatives are actually being taken forward here. So the kind of lifetime protection and maintenance of the trees as a condition, amendment to the condition, is that broadly supported? I think, yeah. I have it down as I'd agree with Councillor Fenton's proposal around it being an informative in terms of discussions with the parish council, because I don't think we can condition that without having a piece of specific land. Is that supported in terms of it being an informative? Likewise, we've discussed protection of T19 in terms of informative. Is that broadly agreed in terms of that tree? Yeah. And then I guess the more challenging one is around the planting scheme and the maturity of the trees. I'd side on the informative approach, but I would like to check that people are broadly in a support of that in terms of the outline needed. Sorry, you can speak there.
Informative on what in relation to the trees?
This was around whether they need to be mature, whether we're asking for them to bring back a scheme of mature planting, or whether we're supporting that they just take the scheme as it is. Okay, so no informative, just take the scheme as it is. Councillor Waters.
It might just be worth, if we could work it in somewhere, mentioning the point that Councillor Bassey raised about trying to screen the utilitarian buildings as best as possible. Now, whether that was just a living wall, ivy or something planted up there.
Yeah. Any thoughts on what that would look like?
To use best endeavours to screen as best as possible the utilitarian buildings from public view.
I think they've designed they've got a brick clad kiosk as the alternative to the prefabricated metal clad kiosk to tie into the materials they've used for the flood wall So that's why it's designed as it is. And it will always be surrounded by handrails. You can see just on there, handrails, green painted pipes to the pumps. That being said, it's in your hands if you want them to want to put a condition on saying notwithstanding the materials approved, that they come back with a scheme showing something different.
From my own perspective, I don't want to get into the position of us, without there being massive consensus on this being required, this being something that we get into the area of conditioning changes to schemes with what's come up. So unless someone says otherwise, I'd propose that we don't take that forward as a condition, unless anyone feels strongly otherwise. No. Okay. We've had multiple people speak in support. I think I'm happy to take that. I'm just looking at formal proposer in a second. There's someone to propose.
Councillor Melly.
Oh, Councillor Melly, sorry, I've not seen you.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah.
Sorry, I know I've already brought it up, but before we decide exactly what we're voting on, I just wanted to be absolutely sure that by not conditioning when the temporary construction compound ends by, we're not leaving permanent, in perpetuity planning permission to drive vehicles onto the site. Just because the permission goes with the site, not the applicant, and it's a public site, I don't want in the future someone to drive on and, technically there's planning permission that there is a route there to drive on.
Okay. Well, I'd probably say that I don't think that's necessary, but you can, or rather we could tighten up that condition. Forget now which one it was. Condition 11 to refer to the removal of the construction compound and the road. Yeah.
Just so we're not granting planning permission for vehicle access to the site.
It will become part of the Fulford Parish Council recreation ground, so they will have management of it thereafter, I assume.
Yeah, just as long as there's not planning permission to drive vehicles along that route from the east.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, seeking a proposer, sorry, for moving up the recommendation. Sorry, you've already done it. Sorry, I was a bit of confusion. Yeah, you proposed it, and the seconder, please. Yeah, Councillor Hollier. Thank you.
So, a recommendation to approve. We have the conditions in the report as amended by the tabled update regarding the archaeology conditions, condition 6. Just to clarify that condition, I think we said that we can't consult with the Battlefield Society and other bodies. We can consult with them. It's just they can't be named in the condition as being party to the approval. Only the local planning authority can approve. But then we have an informative to try and push that consultation onto the applicant in terms of what we get as a submission. So then we have condition 11 amended to remove the 10-year period and replace it for the lifetime of the development. There was also following that there was the further alteration to condition 11 regarding the removal of the temporary construction compound and road. Then there was the informative to urge the retention of tree C19, and then an informative for the council's applicant to engage with Fulford Parish Council regarding compensatory public open space. Is that it? Yeah,
think that could be.
okay.
Okay, in that case, can I see those who are in favour of voting for the officer recommendation with those amendments? Okay, that's unanimous and that application is approved. We'll take a very short break so people can leave before the final application, which will hopefully move through quickly. Hi, welcome back. We will pick this up with the final planning application evening, which is item 4C, the Tramways Club. We're also joined by Jonathan Kenyon, this is the officer, Development Management Officer.
Ready to go? Yeah. Thank you, Chair. So this agenda item 4C is a planning application at the now vacant Tramways Club on Mill Street. And the proposal is a demolition of the existing building and the erection of a residential building to form 35 apartments, associated landscaping, and then public realm improvements to the adjacent rest gardens following the demolition of the former Tramways Club. So the what's called the rest gardens here is the closed St. George's churchyard, which is included within the red line boundary of the application, and there are proposals which will come to in the presentation to do some environmental improvement works there. So just go through the presentation. So site plan on this. There we go. The site plan you can see hatched. I think you can see that, yeah, hatched on the site plan. That's the outline of the existing building on the site, and then the darker grey is a footprint of the proposed building. Site is within the Central Historic Core Conservation Area. There are St. George's Church and its attached rectory is listed at grade 2, and the Turpin grave within the churchyard is also listed at grade 2. Google Street View image showing the extent of the site. The listed church, Piccadilly, 5-storey hotel building and residential apartments opposite on Mill Lane and with a Piccadilly frontage, and then on George Street, and this is the Peel Street car park. It's the Tramway Club. Just see the stonework of the church building. Trees along the frontage, along the George Street frontage, which are proposed to be retained. Another view of the club, the residential, 3-storey residential. This is a view across the closed churchyard. You can just see the outline of the Tramway Club there, and the hotel building behind. That is that's Mill Street, just showing the relationship between those two. The Tramway Club, the hotel, and the residential buildings. And here's a photograph from the Piccadilly end showing the residential buildings opposite, and then another view of the Tramway Club. So the Tramway Club has is on 3 levels, so a cellar and lower ground bar level, the principal ground floor level with its function rooms and ancillary facilities. There's an upper floor lounge bar and the double height, that function room had a double height space. As existing elevations. So the proposed site plan, as I said, 35 apartments. So this is the ground floor plan. Sorry, that's the site plan. This is the basement floor plan with cycle storage and bin storage. Proposed ground floor plan. A typical upper floor. and then a proposed fourth floor. So two of the flats would be duplex. I'll show how that works in the elevations. So on fronting George Street, the sheer 3-story with a mansard story above and this block, so that the I guess the forwardmost part of the block towards George Street and the top end of Mill Street, 3-story sheer with the mansard above. Slightly different elevational treatment where it abuts the hotel building further down Mill Street. Then that's the back of that. There's the top of those duplex flats that I mentioned before, just in a roof, further roof level. So where the description talks about 5 stories, it's really restricted to that area there, adjacent to the hotel. Proposed sections. So this shows the relationship with the listed St. George's Church and the Rectory. And then the relationship with the properties on the other side of Mill Street. Landscape master plan. So this shows the alterations that have been proposed to the former churchyard. Have a level access. At the moment, it's stepped access into the gardens, so the provision of a levels access. A more usable, at the moment, the path is bark chips. So this would give a more usable path. And then some tree planting and other plantings to generally tidy the area up where necessary. Oops. Okay. Does anyone want to see any more? There's no one there. Anyone would like to see any more of the drawings? I'll take it back to the.
Can I see, is there a closer up image of the ground floor? I was just looking, basement floor, sorry. I was looking at the park cycle arrangements before. Difficult to see on the plans.
It's still difficult to see, I'm afraid. So this is accessed by a platform lift or a lift down from ground floor level.
Just to explain, so where the hand is hovering over at the moment, where it's painted out, that's where there would be space for oversized, longer cycles. So the access into that basement has all been sized appropriately. So if we look at the LTN 120 guidance on oversized cycle dimensions, they fit in the lift and they can maneuver into those oversized areas there, which provides up to 4 spaces. So that's over and above the 5% guidance target for oversized of an overall provision.
So from George Street there's this pedestrian gate and an access, and then the lift is in here. And that will also be the bin access is also there.
Right.
Downstairs or through that platform.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions on plans? No. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to public part. Oh, sorry, you've got an update to add in. Thank you.
Sorry. So the update's been circulated in the handouts. There's an additional representation from the Civic Trust we received on Monday, and there is a proposed amendment to the landscaping condition, which I can quickly run you through. So the Civic Trust advised a welcome in principle redevelopment of the site, an opportunity to remove a dilapidated building and improve public realm and streetscape, but they did raise a few issues which they have with the application. They referred to the massing and the height of it, said it was challenging for its context, especially they referred to the top floor and how that would be viewed in context with the churchyard. They made reference to the angular building form and the considerable use of flat roofing, which they feel is at odds with the universal use of pitched roofed buildings nearby. And in terms of the use, they did say that the inclusion of affordable housing would be preferred, and they would object if the use was for short-term holiday lets. In terms of the landscaping, as we showed you on the presentation earlier, the proposed drawings include the graveyard area, and we've sought some feedback from our public realm team as they'd be responsible for the maintenance of that area over its lifetime going forward. And the advice that we got back from them is that they'd very much welcome the improved access arrangements and the hard landscaping measures. But they identified there was quite a lot of wildflower planting that isn't something that they'd be able to maintain as a council. So that's informed our proposed amendment to condition 22, which allows us to approve a soft landscaping scheme, and for us to be satisfied essentially that that's been installed appropriately before the council becomes responsible for its maintenance going forward.
Thank you. Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Chair. Is there a condition about holiday lets? And if not, can we put one in?
No, there isn't. We take the view that the use of the holiday lets, as you know, like a multiple let, frequent turnover let, is usually a change of use. So if this was this planning application is proposing residential accommodation under C3 of the use classes order, then introducing holiday lets would be a material change of use. It's not straightforward because there's nothing in planning legislation that says it is. It's sort of an amalgam of case law and appeal decisions that put us in that position. So we would say you'd probably need a planning application to change the use once planning permission had been granted.
Thanks. Okay, we'll now move into public participation. The first speaker who I'll call up is Margaret Rowlinson in objection. Margaret, if you join, if you just want to make sure that the microphone's on, so just there should be a little button to press there. Yeah, thank you. And you've got 3 minutes to speak, so just start when you're ready.
Section 72 of the Planning Act 1990 requires the local authority to pay special attention to any proposed development in a conservation area in order to preserve and enhance its character and appearance. The 2011 appraisal stated that any new buildings should respect the current building's scale, block dimensions and local height, and this proposed development respects none of those. Development would be in the Central Heritage Core Conservation Area, which consists primarily of 2- and 3-storey residential properties. The size and scale of this building would overshadow neighbouring properties and mean loss of outlook and be totally out of character. The need to protect this area was recognised by the Planning Department when the application for the Piccadilly Plaza project was made. The developers were told that unless they restricted the height of the properties fronting onto George Street and those facing the Tramways Club at the upper end of Mill Street to 3 stories, then planning permission would be refused. because they would not be complying with the requirements of a development in the conservation area. I'd like to refer you to the 2 drawings I added to the document list on the 30th of October. One is the sectional drawing provided by the developers, which includes outlines of the 6-storey hotel and the 5-storey part of Trafalgar House that fronts onto Piccadilly. These 2 buildings are not relevant to this application, but what the outlines do serve to do is detract attention from the 2 relevant buildings, i.e. the existing and proposed properties on Mill Street. The second drawing has had the outlines removed, and this gives a much clearer picture of the relative heights of these 2 properties and the negative and adverse impact that this is going to have on the local area. I know Councillor Melly and Councillor Clark have seen these properties, seen these photographs. If it's not possible to get them up and you would like to see them, I have got paper copies. Parking is an absolute nightmare in the area. Need way outstrips provision. 35 new properties are only going to aggravate the problem. The Peel Street car park is full most days. The surrounding area is parking permit only, a scheme that we're excluded from, as will the new development. And although there are 35 properties, they comprise 1, 2 and 3 bedroom properties in developments. So with a potential increase of 51 people with transport needs, it's the whole situation there, parking situation is going to be made much, much worse.
That's thank you. Perfectly on time.
With the kitchen clock.
I'll just so to be clear, you won't be able to share the photographs, but
Sorry?
Just to be clear, you won't be able to share the photographs with the committee. They're not able to be shared.
Even though they're on the I thought if they were on the document, I was told if they were on the document list, then it was possible to do that. I wasn't allowed to hand in things.
Sorry.
Our presentation is put together by us. We don't collect them. We don't show what's on the. We don't show what's.
Okay.
There's been a misunderstanding.
What was the other?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think the view is that they aren't able to be shared just because of, I think they needed to have been shared. They'd have needed to be shared with us before the meeting so that we could just sign that off. Sorry. Does anyone have any questions for the speaker? Yeah, Councillor Waters on his first and then Councillor.
Well, just querying, what's the difference between putting the photographs out and receiving these, which
I think we received
a good read.
I think the difference is that we received those in good time and were able to check the documents before they're circulated around the table, would be my answer to that. Councillor Fenton.
Chair, we've had photographs passed around planning committees forever.
Well, but that's only if they've been seen beforehand.
No, Chair, no.
Well, and if they haven't, then that shouldn't have happened. I don't know. I'll just start setting the incorrect rule. Councillor Fenton, do you have a question? Sorry.
Just picking up the point you raised about parking. So I understand the way the system works, whereby when new developments are constructed, those residents do not have right of entry into the existing residents' parking scheme. So it is a problem that new developments are being sold on the basis of the availability of on-street parking that doesn't exist, or I'm just trying to understand what residents' expectations are from from developments that have been built nearby recently in terms of is it not that residents understand what they're getting when they move into a city centre area without designated parking?
No,
I just wondered how it works in practice from your perspective.
Yes. One of the major difficulties is getting access to tradesmen. We can't guarantee they're going to be able to park somewhere when they arrive, and trying to find someone who's prepared to come, drop off the things, go and find a parking place, come back, do the job, go back, get the car. it's just not going to happen. And if these properties are supposed to have got the cycle provision in the basement, I'm not sure how many people are going to be able to deal with just cycling as the method of transport. There are things you can't do on cycle. You can't get a week's shopping. There's all sorts of things. They are, I think, within a comparatively short time, there's going to be requests that they're going to want cars. And that's going to mean they're going to be wanting to park in that area, which is already incredibly difficult. And it's just going to exacerbate the whole problem.
Thanks. I can't see any further questions, so thank you for your time speaking. Next up, we have Councillors Melly and Councillor Clark speaking as ward councillors.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, as ward councillors, we've got a lot of concerns about these designs, along with local residents and the MP and the Civic Trust and Guildhall Planning Panel. There's lots of grounds for our objections and that we just can't cover in 3 minutes, but we're happy to answer questions, and our objection is summarised on pages 139 and 140 of our report. So if you've read that, we'll just focus on a couple of points. If you want to ask us about anything else, that's fine. In addition to what we've already put in our objection, I just wanted to highlight that this application needs to be viewed in the setting of the city walls and the Walmgate residential area, because that's the area that it's actually a part of. Yes, it's near Piccadilly, but it's not on Piccadilly. It's part of a well-established residential area of Walmgate, and it's in the setting of Leadmill Lane and Hope Street and George Street, which is all a well-established and quite interesting residential area with a long history, including of Irish immigration and that sort of thing. This site is as close to the city walls as it is to Piccadilly, and I'm not sure that's been that well reflected so far in how you've been shown the setting of the site. The main argument given in favour of this development is housing provision and shortage of housing, but seeing as this site isn't going to be providing the affordable housing that it should, and given that the design, the location, the size, the design are all quite well suited for short-term holiday lets, and there's no condition suggested to prevent that, there's no guarantee that this would actually provide any housing at all. Officers mentioned national planning law. That's likely to have changed by the time this is built. It's currently being reviewed by government. There needs to be if you are minded to approve this, there needs to be a specific condition so that if they are used as short-term holiday lets, it's in a clear breach of planning conditions, not some law which may or may not exist in the future. Do you want to?
Yeah, thanks. So there's a couple of things that we wanted to highlight. The first was about, from my perspective, of what I'm going to talk about is the cycle storage, and secondly about the roof as well. So the cycle storage is in the basement area. So it's in the basement along with the bins and the plant equipment. And we don't think that is very suitable and easily accessible for the residents trying to get their cycles out. There's quite a lot of manoeuvring, a lot of toing and froing with their bikes through narrow corridors in quite cramped conditions, and then into a lift to take the bike upstairs, and you have to go forward or back. It's not easy. I would say it's not the most easiest of ways of getting your bike in and out, and may in fact prevent people from wanting to use their cycles, given the situation. I mean, we welcome the cargo bikes, the increase in dimensions of a couple of the spaces for cargo bikes, but again, we would question whether the space has been increased adequately, and certainly in terms of the way you have to use the lifts, whether those dimensions would be adequate as well. And the second thing I wanted to highlight was regarding the roof and what the Civic Trust have submitted in terms of the fact that the roof, or the proposed roof, the mansard roofing, does not, the flat roofing, etc., is not really typical of the roofscape, the roofscape in that part of the city and the surrounding areas.
Thank you.
Are we on 3 minutes?
Yeah,
Oh,
that's the 3 minutes. If that's okay. Sorry, I don't know if there was anything you wanted to sum up on, but that is the 3 minutes. Does anyone have any questions for the ward councillors on this one? Can you? Oh, sorry, Councillor Fenton. Yeah.
Just in relation to the proposals for the rest garden, is that something you think would be welcomed? Are there aspects of what's proposed that you think could potentially be improved? It's useful to understand what what your thoughts are on that, please.
I'm in favour of the principle of improving that public space. There is antisocial behaviour that goes on there, and the space isn't particularly well used at the moment. It's obviously valuable to the community, but it's mostly used for walking dogs, that sort of thing. Any improvement to public realm is very welcome, especially in such a highly populated area where there's very limited outdoor green space. We want it to be as good as possible, but I'm not sure it's really adequately conditioned to actually happen. And then it's the council who needs to maintain it in perpetuity, and the designs haven't been done with any consultation with local residents or local councillors. We've checked with the previous councillors as well, that there's a few parks in the ward that we're trying to improve, and we're coming up against what can you do that doesn't need long-term maintenance and that can be affordable in the future and that residents want. And none of that thought seems to have gone into this. And we've already heard about, seasonal planting and wildflowers and that sort of thing, which need long-term maintenance. And that is, this application would leave that being done, either not being done at all, because it's not adequately conditioned in my view, or being done at public expense, not at the expense of the developer. It should have been designed with residents in mind and in consultation with residents, and it hasn't been.
Thanks. I think that's all the questions that I can see. So if you want to take a seat. Okay. Don't think the next speaker is here, so we'll move on to Richard France speaking in support of the application. There's also the architect, I believe, on hand to answer questions if required, but they'll join when they need to.
Good evening. My name is Richard France and I'm the Managing Director of the Oakgate Group, the owners and developers of the site. Since 1995, Oakgate has invested heavily in York, over £250 million, is currently leading with the council and York College, the Construction Skills Partnership. Following the decision by the members of the former Tramways Club to sell, due to rapidly declining membership and viability, we acquired the site at competitive tender in 2018. Since our pre-application request in 2019, we have collaborated closely with council officers working up the scheme. We have incorporated all their required changes and amendments, and the result is the recommended proposal before you today. We initially looked at different uses on the site, but it was suggested that a residential scheme would help meet the city's acute housing needs, as it was the most appropriate use given the site's location in a residential area. Officers also advised on the scale and massing of the development to ensure that the dominance of St George's Church was not compromised. Subsequently, we reduced the height and massing of the original proposed building, and elevational treatments were also amended accordingly. After submitting our planning application in 2021, dialogue continued with officers, resulting in further reduction of the development footprint by resiting it further back from the boundary than the existing buildings, emphasising and ensuring that the trees in the rest garden would be unharmed. We met with the council's landscape and tree officers and local volunteers of the rest gardens, and as a result have produced proposals that will significantly improve both this important local amenity for residents and Dick Turpin's grave, which is a feature of the York tourist experience. The improvements to the gardens will come both directly in terms of much needed investment and also indirectly in terms of the natural surveillance from the new apartments, which will help to alleviate some of the current antisocial behaviour problems. The scheme has been sensitively designed to avoid being harmful to the character and appearance of the conservation area and avoiding harm to the setting of the adjacent listed buildings, resulting in the council's conservation officer having no objections to the scheme. Because of the extensive collaboration with officers, we've arrived at a scheme that will provide 35 much needed new homes designed to exceed national internal space standards. And for Councillor Orrell, the dwellings provided will incorporate a provision within the leases prohibiting short-term lets, including Airbnb. We are doing what we can to ensure these homes are for local people. Our approach on this application has been to work with the council officers throughout, and I hope you'll agree with their conclusion and approve this proposal for much needed new homes in the city on one of the city's most sustainable brownfield sites. Thank you very much.
Councillor Fenton, please.
Thank you. In terms of the rest garden, we've heard that the investment in that space is welcome because it certainly would benefit from some investment. So in terms of the plans that have been arrived at, there's a suggested amended condition with a view to the council agreeing exactly what the layout would consist of in terms of usability for residents and ease of maintenance for the council. So is that a condition you would be content with, and what else can you offer in terms of support for the council in relation to the long-term maintenance of that space, because it will cost money?
Right. We would be more than happy, and I can understand, you know, planting wildflowers might be a greater maintenance problem than anything else, but I'm sure we can come to an agreement as to what should be planted, and that we haven't got a problem with that. We quite happen to have that conditioned in that respect. Secondly, we have also looked, obviously, we would be putting so much money aside each year towards the maintenance of the site through the service charge, small service charge from the apartments, and because they get the benefit as well from overlooking it, and that is very important. I mean, the cost of doing the works on the rest garden is, we estimate, up to about £100,000, which is a substantial amount. We've also inquired, because this is a absolutely ideal thing that the National Lottery Heritage Fund would be quite keen to assist with, and we can't apply for it. You've got to have planning permission, first of all, and normally the council will apply for it together with the developer, and that is something obviously we would like to take forward. I've got all the documents to do it. It's just that I can't do it at the moment because I've not planning permission. So that we would see as another great benefit, because either trying to get a lump sum that could be annuited over a period of time to allow for the maintenance. But once we've done the initial works, maintenance, it would look to do, you know, the maintenance should not be as costly. And of course, at the moment, you've got volunteers doing it.
Okay, Councillor Fenton again.
So thanks for that. So a different question on financial viability. So the report sets out details of the financial viability assessment that was undertaken and what the outcome of that was, which suggests a 35,632 contribution for off-site affordable housing. There's a suggestion in the report that upon completion of the development that valuation is reviewed. to see whether there's any scope for increasing the contribution towards affordable housing. Is that something you have a problem with?
No, we agreed to it initially, and that I haven't got a problem with that. I mean, what I would say is, of course, we went through a very extensive process. Bear in mind, we bought it in 2018, 2019, and that's 4 or 5 years ago. And in that time, building costs have increased dramatically. I mean 50, 60%. And we actually envisage we would most probably have a certain amount of affordable there, circa 3 to 5 affordable units. But as time went on, the costs rose, the building got smaller, the footprint got smaller, and we've ended up with what we've got. It was all then put forward to the DVs, and the DVs then got independent cost consultants who obviously adhered to the same figures that we were using roughly, and hence the figure came up as it is now. So the viability was shown to be as proposed, but we haven't got a problem in having it revalued. That's not a problem.
Got a couple of quick questions. The bike storage, the location of the bike storage, obviously the planning policy in York is very firmly in favour of your bikes being as easily accessible as possible from there, having developed in York before. That's a very stringent thing that we put forward as policy, but the location of the bike stores in this are downstairs and accessed via a lift, which isn't probably the easiest way to do it. Normally in a block of flats, you'd have some way to be able to cycle in and out of the building without having to go through this. I just wondered why those design choices have been made, I guess.
Now then, I'm not terribly expert on bike stores, but Sue Sparling, our architect, is. So I'll let her to answer your question.
Might work. Yes, that might work, doesn't it? Obviously, as you highlighted at the start, the Tramways Club has an existing basement. And obviously we are demolishing everything above ground, but we're looking to reuse the basement. We've been through extensive dialogue with Highways about the location of the cycle store. York have got a very detailed guide on accessibility, where you've got tracking for bikes. We've actually done individual studies on being able to move into the lift, pull out of the lift, move into the cycle store to demonstrate to Highways, because they were very thorough on this, that the cycle store will actually work. And we've actually extended, the lift is longer than York's guidance. It suggests 2 meters and the lift's 2.4. So we're trying to give as much room as possible. Obviously, there is a push to have more housing. So we've reused that basement space, making it useful for cycling, making sure it's fully accessible in line with York's guidance. And we wanted to make sure we had housing at ground floor, because then we've got natural surveillance over Mill Street and over the rest gardens from a positive streetscape point of view. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. And I guess the other one was, is it obviously a kind of strangeness of timing, but there is a new local plan policy in terms of the kind of building use and it being marketed for community use. I wonder whether there'd been any exploration of community use for the site during the process, or whether that was always looked beyond as residential.
When we started, as I said, when we started the pre-application process, we initially looked at a lot of different uses, including, from memory, boutique hotels, senior living, because I was thinking for myself, I think, and other opportunities. And it was suggested to us during the pre-application meeting that residential would be the right thing to do, since there was such a critical shortage, and it was basically a residential area. So we said, well, if that's really what you want, what's the point of fighting against you? So that's where we went along.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Waters, please.
Well, just on that point, it does seem rather bizarre that you weren't encouraged into senior living because presumably those occupants would have been less likely to have owned cars. Just wonder what your proposals at the moment would be to discourage future occupants from owning cars. Would the marketing be around, well, there are no parking spaces associated with this development?
I think, well, it will be. The whole thing's been, the values have been worked on the basis there's no car parking spaces. I mean, in our original plans, I'm just coming back to me now, that we had about 4 or 8 townhouses with car parking underground, and it was like a little enclave, you know, facing southwards and what have you. But that seemed a bit OTT for this particular part of the world, and I don't think what you're looking for into. I mean, car parking is very emotional. I mean, we actually wanted to put some car parking onto George Street opposite the church, because of course there's always been that run through, and we said, if we can't do that, can we just have it for residents, be able to put, you know, having Amazon vans but just parking there and delivering stuff and all this sort of stuff. And we've been told just cannot have it. We were told by the highways just there was no way they wanted any car parking around there. So we reluctantly agreed to put it into bikes.
So just to clarify, that if these properties are marketed, they will be marketed as having no car parking.
Oh God, yeah. We've had to value it as that as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that is absolutely right. It's and we did, as you know, we did Stoneboat House, and there's some car parking there, but there's not car parking for everybody. And it's the only very rich people at the very top who've got 2 car parking spaces in one view. So, but no, it's marketed with no car parking.
And highways have specifically confirmed, highways have specifically confirmed that, because as I said, the R18 plan up earlier, that the residents won't be eligible for permit parking. Obviously, they'd have to seek their own parking spaces if they wanted to pay for a space somewhere. But we're seeing it as architects, we're seeing the push in any city centre to move away from encouraging people to own cars. And I find a lot of our own younger people, students, graduates, haven't even learnt to drive now, because they're moving towards living in city centres, and that's what we should be encouraging. But I understand the concern, but we have gone through it with highways, so therefore we will not be eligible for residence passes. Does that answer the question?
Thank you. I can't see any further questions at this time, so if you want to take a seat.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone have any questions? Yeah, Councillor Hollier, questions for officers before we move on.
On the viability, I suppose I'm just interested how the hierarchy of where the money goes to is determined. Not necessarily that I disagree with how the money's been allocated, but just sort of education gets all its allocation. I guess open space and sport do, and then it's sort of what's left is affordable housing. Is that sort of set out somewhere?
We discussed this yesterday, Jonathan, so you can answer this one.
I think that the reason why the affordable housing is typically the one that suffers when viability is an issue is because in terms of our policies, our affordable housing targets are our targets, and they're what we aspire to, whereas the other items that we've got in the list of planning obligations are typically their infrastructure and things that are seen to be directly necessary to support the development, so they can't be compromised. So as an example, if we're approving a residential development, we're potentially bringing more children into the area, so we're putting a requirement on the schools to accommodate more children, so we have to pay for those extra places. Whereas the affordable housing is not, it's not an issue we're making any worse as such by not meeting the targets. It's just this scheme isn't contributing to meeting what the local plan looks to achieve in terms of the housing targets for affordable housing over the plan period.
Okay, thank you. And the viability review mechanism, can you say a bit about how that works? Does it, I mean, does it effectively claw back any additional kind of profit made on the scheme above what's in the assessment at the moment? And then sort of puts that to affordable housing until the point that they've kind of met the policy requirement, and then they can kind of keep anything above that, or?
The guidance in the national planning guidance about the review mechanisms is that they need to be as firstly as simple as possible, but they also need to be fair. So they would generally, we would decide with the developer as to which of the headline inputs we would capture. So the profit in the scheme, if by the time the houses are built and that profit is higher, then it tends to be agreed as part of the appraisal that does come back towards affordable housing. But in terms of being reasonable, we would normally also have to accept that we have to look at the build costs as well, because they're also subject to change and movable. So that is another factor that could change by the time the scheme, if it's built sort of within a reasonable time frame as to when the appraisal was done, then they're not necessarily going to change. But if the scheme's not built for 3 years, it's perfectly reasonable that we look at the build costs again, and they could go either way. They might even come down. It's unlikely, but they could go up or down. So they tend to be the two items that we'd look at when we redid the appraisal, what the houses sell for and what the build costs are. And as you say, if there's more money in the scheme at the end of the day, then that would come back to the council as a commuted sum towards affordable housing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions? No. That case, we'll move into discussion on the item. If anyone would like to start us off. Councillor Fenton, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think it's been helpful through the discussion and questions, certainly some of the issues that certainly I picked up on the site visit, and having heard to the public speakers have been addressed in relation to plans for the maintenance of the design and maintenance of the rest garden. I think it was perhaps a missed opportunity not to have undertaken more extensive local consultation before the application was finalised. But I think there is an opportunity now, and if the amended condition is approved, to make sure that that is designed in a way that meets the needs of local residents, well, of new residents and existing residents, and doesn't create a unsustainable financial burden on the council. But I welcome the commitment to make an annual financial contribution from the service charges that the new residents would pay. Welcome the words from the applicant around trying to prevent this development becoming a short-term holiday let development, which I think is something that clearly is a concern, because we're weighing up the balance here between the provision of new housing in a sustainable location, and as the architect mentioned, that's exactly the kind of accommodation that we want to provide, and that there is a market for. It's obviously the potential benefits are undermined if that housing in reality is not available to the people who need it. So I'm assured by what I've heard in terms of the visual impacts. I think the fact that the development steps up away from St George's Church clearly sort of reduces the harm to the setting of St George's Church. I know from being that area on the side of the street opposite the church, there are a number of quite large residential developments that do that over time have come to impact on the setting of the church. I don't believe that this development would have an unacceptable impact on on the setting of the church, but it is right that that is given proper consideration. So I'm as things stand, and inclined to support the officer recommendation.
Anyone likes to add anything? Guess from my perspective, there's a lot about the scheme that I don't support in some ways. I mean, obviously the viability is an argument, and it's been through a district valuation process, but the reality of building inside the city walls deliver affordable housing in a variety of parts of the country of much lower values than the centre of York. So I don't know if it's, while the process is the process, it's not something I'm massively comfortable with, and it offers a lot less public benefit by not providing affordable housing contribution. But that is what we're presented with, and have to make the decision on. Likewise, I don't think the cycle parking is good. The fact that there's had to be tracking surveys done the approach should be to try and provide the best possible option, not to have to argue why that option is acceptable, because it fits with what you're trying to achieve. And likewise, the lack of disability parking is or under provision is not supportive of the kind of anyone living in that community. While you've got a lift in, it's not a great approach to how you develop a scheme, to be honest, in some of those parts, some of those key elements. But I think for me, I mean, I get the impression that, you know, there is a lot about the scheme that's acceptable, and obviously the additional housing is, you know, would be a positive for the environment. I think an additional condition to tighten it up around short-term lets is really important, because I don't think the planning policy is there right now for managing individual leasehold apartments, maybe for the whole block, but for individual leaseholders, I think it's important that there's a bit more control on there, and that's clarified. So I'd be supportive of adding a condition around that, and the reasoning for that being is that we've lost a significant amount of private rental homes in the city due to the increase of Airbnbs. That's been a major impact on the amount of private rents we have, and on standard housing as well. So I think that's really important that we put that in, if other people are supportive. But I'd obviously ask the views of yourselves as committee members before we put something like that on it. Councillor Waters.
And is it worth requiring an informative just to well, you can't enforce it, but the council would advise that it would seek to see the marketing of the properties to future occupants, fully appraised of the parking situation, active discouragement for people actually owning cars that were moving in there. You can guess the type of wording, and I realise it can't be anything stronger than an informative, but it might allay some of the fears of local residents.
Yeah, I would support that. Councillor Fenton.
Yes, in terms of the suggestion of having a condition around reducing the risk of short-term holiday lets, I mean, I suppose I'd welcome Gareth's advice as to what we reasonably can. Obviously, we've heard the statement from the applicant, which is obviously welcome, but it'd be helpful to understand how, in terms of a condition, how we can kind of embed that reasonably.
Yeah. I'm not sure I don't recall as imposing Hudson Quarter. That's a big scheme. I can't recall as imposing a similar condition. Certainly on schemes at the smaller end of the development scale, and that's generally been because if we're granting permission for C3 dwellings, our view is that frequent turnover holiday lets, rather than just someone buying as a weekend place for themselves, is a material change of use. But we are conscious that we do get forced on that when we try and enforce that view. But I think the weight of evidence is generally that is the case. We don't have a policy that seeks that sort of thing in the local plan or the emerging local plan. So I think what makes it reasonable, or if members feel it's necessary, is the reason behind it, and that has to be specific to this building. Why in this particular case do we feel that that type of condition is necessary on a 35 apartment development in the city centre? What makes this particular development special that it should, not special, that's the wrong word. Why should that requirement be imposed on this particular development when it hasn't been on others? I mean, it might well be an evolving process where in the future, when perhaps the legislation changes, that we move forward onto that. But at the moment, it's not been something that we have done. But I'm conscious that just put a burden on our planning enforcement colleagues, because we end up chasing our tails on unauthorised changes of use.
But we have applied it on homes previously, dwellings. Well, I've seen some.
We may have. I doubt whether that would be a full part of the recommendation, and I can't recall where we've done it before.
Okay. It's like we can't.
It's a case of having the justification.
Yeah.
Having the justification to prove that it's necessary and reasonable to do so.
For that building.
For that building, yes, that location.
Yeah, I don't think I can. Would anyone like to add anything else in terms of discussion, or else I guess at this page I'd be asking someone if they're happy to formally propose and second maybe.
What you could do is put an informative on to set out the council's view that use as a holiday let would constitute a material change of use that would require planning permission.
Yeah. I mean, I would do that. Yeah, I'd support that. I don't think. Thanks. Okay. Propose, yeah, councillor Fulham.
Yeah, happy to propose with the amended condition and the other things. Yeah,
thank you. Yeah. And anyone second? Sorry, councillor Orrell seconded. Yeah, in that case, Gareth, can you take us through the recommendation?
So recommendation on as per page 152 onwards of the agenda. We tabled the amendment to condition 22 to recommend the additional informative and suggested regarding the siting outside the resident parking zone, and for that to be drawn to potential purchasers' attention through marketing. There's the holiday let's informative. The maintenance contribution that was raised, that's not in the recommendation.
Oh, sorry.
It's not something that's been negotiated. Now there is on 153, there is the Roman 2, which talks about the head of planning and development services given delegated authority to finalise the terms and details of the section 106 agreement. But that wouldn't normally involve inserting something new, but if members through this decision process would like us to explore that more in terms of the maintenance contribution, even what the applicant says, we can cover that safely, I believe.
Yeah, I think that would be
okay.
Is that agreed? I think that'd be important. That's been discussed today.
I think that's captured it, everything.
Yeah, with that, thank you. Thank you. Can I see those who are in favour for moving the officer's recommendation as it stands, please? And those who are against? And those who abstain. So that has been approved and the officer recommendation is moved and the application is approved. We have one more short item, but if you just want to make your way out, that's fine. We can just give you a quick pause before we go. Welcome back. We have a final short item, which is which is 4D planning appeal, performance and decisions. There's a short report. Gareth, I don't know if there's anything you want to mention specifically on this item.
It's kind of the same thing I say every time it comes, really, that we're losing more appeals than we used to, and our appeal performance is percentage allowed is more than the average for England, which stands at something like 29%. It's not quite as bad as it appears on table 1 and table 2, because not being a statistician, I just include all the appeals and all the decisions, whereas the planning inspectorate's returns don't include some of the decisions that we do include. So it's not, if you saw the CYC performance in the PINS tables, when they eventually get produced, they wouldn't be the same as what's produced here. But what is taken from the planning inspectorate and the Department of Levelling Up is in paragraph 6, which is this assessment of the quality criteria, which takes appeals overturned set against all the decisions the council makes on all applications, and we are, we're well below any assessment that would put us in line to be considered to be a standards authority on that in that respect, which is always good. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions on anything. Any
Councillor Waters.
Gareth, I just wonder if you could confirm how many cases costs were awarded against the council. I would imagine it's quite easy to answer that.
We have had 3 cost awards against us, which were the first for for a very long period of time. So since something like 2018, we've had 4 cost awards over maybe that might be 300 appeal decisions. But recently we have had a couple. One on the Four Alls pub on the A64, which was the inspector disagreed with our drainage requirements. And because of the length of time that it had taken for the drainage requirements to be agreed whilst the appeal was in progress, he considered that to be unreasonable behaviour, thinking we could have just put a condition on in the first place. The other 2 escape me for the moment, but yeah, we have had a couple. We've looked at why they've been imposed, and we try and impose some more control measures to make sure that they don't happen.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. You surprised me. I thought it'd have been a big 0, but yeah,
It was a big 0
very interesting.
until recently.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No, I can't see. So thank you for that, Gareth. And there's no urgent business, so we'll cause the meeting to a close there. Thank you.